Have you ever woken up on an ordinary morning and for a few seconds couldn't remember why you should get out of bed? Not because of depression or illness, but because of a strange sensation that nothing you'll do today really matters, that all the tasks, appointments, and responsibilities filling your days are just noise, distraction from something much deeper you've lost along the way? If you've ever felt this, know that you're not alone. In fact, you've experienced a moment of clarity about one of the most silent and devastating crises of our time. Millions of people around the world are living a peculiar form of living death, a slow and imperceptible deterioration of something that for millennia was considered the essence of human experience. And the most frightening part is that most don't even realize they've lost it. I'm talking about our capacity to experience the sacred, not in the traditional religious sense, though that's also part of the problem, but in the more fundamental sense of being able to perceive depth, mystery, and transcendent meaning in everyday existence. Throughout all of human history, our ancestors lived immersed in a world full of meaning. Every birth was a miracle, every death a mysterious passage, every season a manifestation of greater forces than themselves. The world wasn't just a collection of objects and mechanical processes, but a living tapestry of symbols, stories, and invisible connections that gave meaning even to the simplest moments of life. Imagine a medieval peasant waking before dawn. He doesn't check his smartphone for notifications or worry about productivity metrics. Instead, he hears the distant church bells calling for morning prayer, and for a few moments feels he's part of something infinitely greater than himself. His daily tasks, however humble, are embedded in a cosmic narrative that connects his individual life to the destiny of his community, his soul, and the entire universe. When he plants seeds, he is not just executing an economic function, he is participating in the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that governs all existence. When he contemplates the stars, he doesn't see distant points of light, but silent witnesses to his spiritual journey. This ability to perceive the sacred wasn't the privilege of just mystics or the particularly religious. It was the standard human condition. Anthropologists who have studied traditional societies discovered that regardless of their specific beliefs, all human cultures developed sophisticated ways of cultivating transcendent experiences, rites of passage that transformed biological events into spiritual milestones, ceremonies that connected the community to the cosmos, contemplative practices that allowed individuals to experience states of consciousness where the boundary between self and universe temporarily dissolved. These weren't primitive or ignorant societies. They were civilizations that understood something fundamental about the human psyche that we, in our supposed sophistication, have completely forgotten. They knew that human beings cannot thrive on bread, entertainment, and material security alone. We need a visceral connection to the mystery of existence. We need to feel that our individual life is part of a story much larger and more beautiful than we can fully comprehend. And then came modernity, bringing with it one of the most radical transformations in human history. In the name of reason, science, and progress, we began systematically dismantling all the structures that allowed humans to experience the sacred. It wasn't a deliberately malicious process. It was presented as liberation. Liberation from superstition, obscurantism, oppressive religious authority. And indeed, it brought immeasurable benefits. Modern medicine saved billions of lives. Technology connected the world. The scientific method gave us extraordinary understanding of the nature of reality, but there was a price that no one adequately calculated. In discarding what we considered illusions of the past, we ended up throwing away our innate capacity to perceive transcendent meaning. The world ceased to be a living temple and became a giant machine. Human beings ceased to be children of the cosmos and became evolutionary accidents in a cold and indifferent universe. Life ceased to be a sacred journey and became a series of random events between two voids, birth and death. The result was what philosophers call the disenchantment of the world. Max Weber, one of the most insightful thinkers of the 20th century, described this process as the gradual elimination of everything mysterious, magical, and meaningful from human experience. The modern world, he said, is like a giant clockwork mechanism, perfectly predictable and completely empty of intrinsic purpose. We live today with the consequences of this transformation in ways we can barely recognize. The epidemic of anxiety and depression that plagues especially the most developed countries isn't just an individual mental health problem, it's the symptom of an entire civilization that has lost contact with the deep sources of meaning that sustained humanity for millennia. When researchers study suicide rates, they discover something paradoxical and disturbing. The richest, safest, and most technologically advanced societies in the world have some of the highest rates of existential despair. Why does this happen? Because we've created a materially abundant but spiritually sterile world. A world where all physical needs can be satisfied, but where the human soul withers from starvation. We've developed technologies capable of connecting any person to any other on the planet in seconds, but we've lost the ability to connect deeply with ourselves and with the mystery of existence. Look at your own typical day, and you'll see the signs of this silent spiritual death. How many moments can you identify where you experienced something we could call sacred? Moments of genuine wonder, of deep connection with something greater than yourself, of perceiving the transcendent beauty that permeates reality. For most people, such moments are extremely rare if they occur at all. Instead, we spend our days navigating between infinite distractions, consuming superficial entertainment, pursuing goals that deep down we know won't bring us the fulfillment we seek. Digital technology has dramatically intensified this process. Our devices are designed to capture and fragment our attention in ways that make deep contemplation almost impossible. Social media has addicted us to constant doses of external validation, destroying our capacity to find satisfaction in contemplative solitude. Algorithms feed us an endless stream of content optimized to keep us engaged, but never truly nourished. The result is that millions of people live in a state of perpetual agitation, always stimulated but never truly satisfied, always connected but profoundly alone, always informed about everything happening in the world, but completely disconnected from the miracle of their own existence. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of this situation is that we don't even realize what we've lost. An entire generation has grown up without ever having consistently experienced the sacred, so they don't miss something they never knew. It's as if we were born in a world without colors and became accustomed to living in shades of gray, never imagining what we're missing. Think about the most meaningful moments of your life. They were probably moments where you experienced, even briefly, something transcendent, perhaps contemplating a sunset and feeling an inexplicable connection to the universe, perhaps holding your newborn child and perceiving that you were before a mystery that no scientific explanation could completely exhaust, perhaps hearing a piece of music that somehow touched something eternal within you, perhaps in a moment of crisis where you felt a comforting presence you couldn't rationally explain. These moments weren't illusions or self-deception. They were glimpses of a dimension of reality that our culture has taught us to ignore, but that remains as real as any phenomenon science can measure. They are openings to what human beings have always intuitively known, that we exist in a universe far more mysterious, interconnected, and meaningful than our materialistic models can capture. I need to pause for a moment to ask you directly, when was the last time you experienced something you could call sacred? Those moments where everyday concerns dissolve and you feel a deep connection with something greater than yourself? I know it may seem like a strange question in our secular age, but your answer reveals much about the state of your soul. If you have difficulty remembering such moments, you're not alone. Millions of people live entire years without experiencing what their ancestors considered essential for a full life. If this feeling resonates with you, share in the comments, I miss the sacred when. Your honesty can help others realize they're not alone in this silent spiritual hunger. The loss of the sacred doesn't only affect our emotional and psychological life, it has profound practical consequences for how we organize our society and how we treat each other and the planet. When the world is just a purposeless machine, it becomes very easy to justify its reckless exploitation. When human beings are just complex arrangements of atoms without souls, it becomes harder to ground human dignity and universal rights. Look at how our civilization treats nature. For a consciousness that can still perceive the sacred, a forest is much more than a collection of timber resources. It's a living temple, a manifestation of cosmic creativity, a system of collective intelligence that deserves reverence and protection. But for a purely materialistic mentality, a forest is just carbon organized in a temporarily complex way with no intrinsic value beyond its economic utility. The same principle applies to human relationships. When we lose the capacity to perceive the sacred in others, they become objects for our manipulation, competitors for scarce resources, or at best, partners in mutually beneficial contracts. We lose the perception that each person carries within themselves an infinite mystery, a spark of the same cosmic consciousness that animates the entire universe. It's no coincidence that the age of disenchantment is also the age of massive alienation, ecological crisis, and the growing dehumanization of social relations. All these problems have a common root: the loss of our capacity to perceive and honor the sacred dimension of existence. But here's a truth that can give us hope. The sacred never really disappeared. We just learned not to see it. It's as if we developed a form of cultural blindness that prevents us from perceiving a dimension of reality that remains as present as it always was. The question isn't to resurrect ancient superstitions or return to obsolete forms of religion. The question is to develop new forms of perception that allow us to rediscover mystery and meaning in a contemporary context. Some of the most revolutionary discoveries of modern science, paradoxically, are reconnecting us with ancient intuitions about the sacred nature of reality. Quantum mechanics revealed that the solid matter that seems to form the basis of everything is actually a dance of probabilities in a field of pure potential. Neuroscience is discovering that consciousness is far more mysterious and fundamental than we imagined. Cosmology has shown us that we exist in a universe of complexity and beauty that surpasses any temple built by human hands. Ecologists are discovering that ecosystems are systems of collective intelligence where each organism participates in a symphony of communication and cooperation that makes our most sophisticated social networks seem primitive. Psychologists are documenting states of consciousness where people experience deep connections with the totality of existence, states that are consistently described as the most meaningful experiences of their lives. Science, which once seemed to eliminate mystery from the world, is actually revealing ever deeper layers of mystery. The universe it presents to us is infinitely more extraordinary than any traditional religious cosmology. A cosmos where galaxies dance in majestic spirals, where life emerges from inorganic matter in a process we still don't fully understand, where consciousness arises from the brain in ways that challenge our simplistic materialist understanding. The problem isn't that we live in a disenchanted world. The problem is that we've lost the eyes to see the enchantment that constantly surrounds us. Every breath we take involves miraculous cooperation between trillions of cells. Every heartbeat pumps through our bodies a fluid more precious than any gold. Every moment of consciousness is a phenomenon more extraordinary than any miracle described in ancient sacred texts. The tragedy of the modern condition is that we've learned to take for granted miracles that should leave us in permanent states of wonder. We've developed a selective blindness that allows us to use technologies our ancestors would consider magical without ever pausing to contemplate the mystery of their existence. We carry in our pockets devices capable of instantly connecting us with anyone on the planet, but we've lost the capacity to deeply connect with ourselves. Rediscovering the sacred doesn't require abandoning reason or returning to superstitious beliefs. It requires only developing what we might call contemplative attention, the ability to pause in the midst of modern life's frenetic pace and truly see, hear, and feel the extraordinary richness of existence that constantly surrounds us, when you truly stop to observe a flower, not just identify it or photograph it for social media, but really contemplate the intricate perfection of its form, the subtlety of its colors, the mystery of how it emerged from dark earth to open to the light, you're experiencing the sacred. When you look into a child's eyes and see not just a small human being, but a walking mystery, a unique consciousness that has never existed before and will never exist again, you're perceiving the sacred. When you sit in silence and allow yourself to feel the miracle of your own consciousness, the extraordinary fact that the universe has developed the capacity to know itself through you, when you truly contemplate the mystery that you are the cosmos experiencing itself subjectively, you're entering the territory of the sacred. This isn't an escape from reality. It's a return to deeper reality. It's the recognition that we live immersed in a mystery so vast and beautiful that our conceptual minds can barely scratch its surface. It's the perception that every moment of existence is simultaneously completely ordinary and absolutely miraculous. The contemplative traditions of all cultures have developed sophisticated techniques for cultivating this expanded perception. Meditation, contemplative prayer, mindfulness practices, sacred rituals, all are technologies of consciousness designed to help us see through the veils of familiarity and rediscover the wonder that is our birthright as conscious beings. But you don't need to become a mystic or join a specific religious tradition to begin cultivating this sensitivity. You can start by simply setting aside a few minutes each day for silent contemplation, to observe your breath and feel gratitude for the miracle of being alive, to look at the night sky and allow the vastness of the cosmos to touch something deep within you, to walk in nature with full attention, perceiving the intricate beauty of the living systems that surround you. What you'll discover is that the sacred isn't something that needs to be added to your life. It's already present in every moment. We just learned not to see it. It's as if we were born in a palace of unimaginable beauty, but spent our entire lives looking at the floor, complaining that life is monotonous and meaningless. The spiritual crisis of our age isn't fundamentally a problem to be solved by external changes, though such changes may be important. It's an invitation to inner transformation, an invitation to rediscover our innate capacity to perceive the world as a living temple, not as a dead machine. When enough people begin to make this transition in consciousness, it naturally manifests in profound cultural and social changes. A civilization composed of people who can perceive the sacred in everyday existence inevitably treats nature, each other, and future generations with more reverence and care. We're beginning to see hopeful signs of this change emerging in many places. Sustainability movements that go beyond economic rationality to embrace an ethic of sacred care for the earth. Business practices that prioritize purpose over pure profit. Communities that organize around values that transcend consumerist materialism. Technologies that are designed not just for efficiency, but to support integral human flourishing. Young people around the world are instinctively seeking ways to reconnect with deeper dimensions of existence. They're experimenting with meditation, nature retreats, contemporary rituals, intentional communities. They're rejecting the superficial materialism of their parents and seeking ways of life that honor both reason and mystery, both science and spirituality, both material progress and inner growth. This isn't a regression to the past. It's a creative integration of ancient wisdom with contemporary possibilities. It's the birth of a new form of civilization that can maintain the benefits of modernity while recovering our connection to transcendent sources of meaning. Imagine a society where education doesn't just transmit information and technical skills, but also cultivates the capacity to perceive beauty, mystery, and interconnection, where leaders are chosen not just for their competence, but for their wisdom and ability to serve something greater than their personal interests, where technology is developed not just for efficiency and profit, but to support the integral flourishing of humans and all living systems, where work is understood not just as a means of economic survival, but as a way of participating in the continuous creation of a more beautiful and compassionate world, where cities are designed not just for efficient movement of people and goods, but as spaces that nurture the human soul and honor our connection with nature. This vision may sound utopian, but it's gradually manifesting through the choices of millions of individuals who are rediscovering the sacred in their personal lives and allowing that perception to transform how they live, work, and relate to the world. The inner death that so many people experience today isn't inevitable. It's the result of a particular way of organizing consciousness and society that has lost contact with essential dimensions of human experience. But just as we learned to live this way, we can learn to live differently. The first step is recognizing what we've lost, admitting that material prosperity, however important, cannot by itself create a fulfilling life. Recognizing that we need beauty, mystery, transcendent connection, a sense of purpose that goes beyond our immediate personal interests. The second step is beginning to consciously cultivate these dimensions in your own life. This can be as simple as setting aside daily time for contemplative silence, or as radical as completely reformulating your priorities and lifestyle. The important thing is to start where you are, with small steps that gradually open your perception to the deeper layers of existence. The third step is finding or creating community with others who are making the same journey. Individual transformation is important, but cultural transformation requires collective effort. We need to support each other in rediscovering the sacred and creating ways of life that honor both our humanity and our connection to the greater cosmos. This isn't just a matter of personal well-being, though that's certainly important. It's a matter of civilizational survival. A culture that has lost contact with the sacred inevitably becomes destructive because it treats everything, including itself, as an object for manipulation and consumption. Only when we recover our capacity to perceive the intrinsic value of existence can we create sustainable ways of living on the planet. The paradox is that by rediscovering the sacred, we don't lose our rational or scientific capacity. On the contrary, it becomes richer and wiser Science practiced by a consciousness that can perceive mystery becomes more humble and more reverent. Technology developed by people who honor the sacred becomes more compassionate and sustainable. Politics practiced by leaders connected to something greater than personal egos becomes wiser and more just. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By seeking to understand these questions more deeply and explore paths to rediscover the sacred in your own life, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a fuller way of existing. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we're witnessing. This isn't just a space for reflection, but an invitation to personal and cultural transformation. Join us in this continuous journey of rediscovering what it means to be truly alive in a universe full of mystery and beauty. The inner death we spoke of at the beginning isn't the inevitable destiny of modern humanity. It's a transitional stage in our collective evolution, a necessary period of disillusionment with old forms of meaning that prepares us for more mature and integrated forms of perceiving the sacred. We stand on the threshold of a spiritual renaissance that can combine the best of traditional wisdom with the unprecedented possibilities of our era. Each person who awakens to this deeper reality contributes to a transformation that will eventually change the face of human civilization. You're not just a passive observer of this transformation, you're an active participant in creating a world where people don't need to die inside, but can live with the wonder and reverence that are our heritage as conscious beings in a sacred cosmos. The question that remains is simple but profound. Are you ready to rediscover what you've lost? To open your eyes to the miracle that has always been right in front of you? To become a force for spiritual renewal in a world that desperately needs to remember what it means to be truly alive? The sacred is waiting patiently for you to recognize it, not somewhere distant or in some future moment, but here and now, in this present moment, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this consciousness that is reading these words and contemplating these ideas. You are already a manifestation of the sacred. The question is when you'll begin to live as such.
This is my name's Robin Ince. I do a show on the radio called The Infinite Monkey Cage, and I love talking about scientific ideas, stories, and technology, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And it's a beautiful thing to be in a place which is officially, for light entertainment and song and dance, and actually be doing a night of scientific discovery. It's something at the Albert Hall. I once just did a night with a bunch of physicists, and I'll tell you what, particle physics, it really does work in a dome like that. And so you all know who you've come to see, someone who, as a writer of scientific stories and scientific history, has done incredible work over the last 10 years. So please welcome to the stage Yuval Noah Harari. Are you okay with that, Chair? Yeah. Some people are sometimes deaf in the one ear, aren't they? That's the... We've got an enormous amount to talk about, including why there's a pigeon on the cover, but I'm not going to reveal that yet. The first thing I want to say, as a storyteller, because I think that's what you really managed to bring so much life to sometimes ideas which might only appear to be an equation in people's minds. What were the first stories when you were growing up that really stuck with you, the stories that excited you?
I think I really started with mythology. I had these books about the Greek mythology and biblical mythology for young kids, and I would read them over and over again. And from there, I actually went to history. So I kind of skipped the fairy tales and the fictions and went straight to history.
And were you, because I was saying earlier, my son's doing History A-level, and I really think what did it for him was first of all finding out about which kings of England were so fat they exploded when they died. And you know, those kind of, it seems with history we have sometimes gory and strange and Vlad the Impaler and Countess Bathory and things like that. You know, did that help lure you in as a child?
I guess to some extent, but I was really interested in kind of the big questions. Also, even before with mythology, of where did everything come from? I mean, why is there something and not just nothing?
And then what were the stories that, because now, once you, I say sapiens, do you say sapiens?
We can say both.
Yeah, we can. We can turn it into a musical number. The Hello Dolly's only just closed here. But I just wanted, that point where you thought, I really want to start dealing with these scientific ideas, and how much that felt like a change, and how much that felt like this was just another way of dealing with stories in the same way that you would deal with stories as a historian.
I mean, I think that humans are essentially storytelling animals. I mean, we think in stories. And part of the problem of science is that science often doesn't know what to do with stories and doesn't convey its messages in stories. So it is almost always at this disadvantage. And when you look at the world, so you see that in almost all cases, the people who only understand facts take orders from the people who understand stories. If you think about, I don't know, the nuclear programs of various countries today and in the past. So people who merely understand things like nuclear physics and quantum mechanics, they take their orders from people who understand things like Jewish mythology and Shiite theology and communist ideology. And this is almost always the case. And it creates a lot of problems. Again, you talk with the people who are leading, and we'll get to AI later, but you talk with the people who are leading many of the scientific and technological revolutions of this day, and just now we heard that the Nobel Prize in both physics and chemistry was given to research in AI, and they have this notion that because we develop the technology and because we understand the science, and maybe because they think they are smarter than everybody else, they will decide what to do with what they discover and what they develop, and this is almost never the case. Then comes along somebody who doesn't understand, again, anything about nuclear physics or anything about AI. They understand some mythology, and they give the orders.
Well, that seems, I mean, that disparity, I'm thinking now, you know, tonight there may well be, well, there will be, possibly terrible destruction in Florida. And some of the people who are both using that as a political point are the same people who are also denying the science that comes with our understanding of climate change. And that seems to be one of the problems that we have, which is where people have so much information available to them, they can keep going, well, I'm going to take that bit to justify this story, and I'm going to take that bit, rather than go, I now want to read all these stories. They just go, which one is most useful to me now?
Yeah, I mean, there is a big misunderstanding about information in general and what people do with it. Too many people tend to think that information somehow means truth and knowledge and wisdom, or that information is the raw material from which you construct truth and knowledge. And it's not the case. The truth is a very small subset of all the information in the world. The truth is a very small subset because it's very costly. It takes a lot of time and effort and money to do research and fact check and analyze information in order to get at the truth. Whereas fiction and fantasy and lies, they are very, very cheap. You don't need to research anything, you just write whatever you want. And, the truth is often complicated, and it is sometimes painful, whereas fiction and fantasy can be as simple and as attractive and flattering as you would like them to be. So what we see again and again in history is that as the amount of information in the world grows because of different discoveries and inventions of humanity, it doesn't mean that the amount of truth and knowledge and wisdom in the world grows. And you see that modern societies are as susceptible as Stone Age tribes to fall victim to these cases of mass delusion, like 20th century fascism or 20th century communism. They are as susceptible to that as a Stone Age tribes. So all the discoveries and all the scientific knowledge and all the technology doesn't really protect us from these dangers.
And do you feel that it seems to me that there's certainly quite a few moments in the book where one of the biggest problems is who controls the dissemination of information? So, yeah. I mean, in the last, certainly since Reagan in America and also Thatcher here, where suddenly there was an ability for people to very close, almost have a monopoly on controlling the stories that are going out. Yes, we can all get our stories out on, some form of social media, but we don't have the huge power behind us of the news media.
The key question in information is not necessarily who produces it, but who disseminates it. Especially when it is very cheap to produce information, the bottleneck is human attention. And there you find not the authors, there you find the editors and the curators. They are they sit at the junctions of the information network. And maybe I'll give two examples from history. So one of the most important editorial processes in the history of humankind was editing the Bible. The Bible did not come down from the sky in its finished form. If you look, for instance, at the early history of Christianity, and when do we have the New Testament? So Jesus didn't write the New Testament, and St. Paul didn't write the New Testament, and they didn't read them, of course, because it didn't exist at the time. In the first centuries of Christianity, different Christian authors and different Christian sects and ways of thinking, they produced all kinds of texts. They wrote Gospels, not just the 4 that became canonical, many Gospels. And they wrote all kinds of prophecies and letters and fables and chronicles and so many different texts. And then there became a problem of what to read. The same way that people today, you open Netflix, so which series to watch, there are so many. You need a recommendation list. So also the early Christians, at a certain point, they needed a recommendation list. And this happened almost 4 centuries after the crucifixion. At the end of the 4th century, there is a committee of bishops and theologians that gathers in 2 cities, in Hippo and then in Carthage, today Tunisia in North Africa, which is a very important Christian center at the time. And this is the committee that comes up with the recommendation list that we know as the New Testament. They created these top 27 texts that every Christian should read. And they made a decision. They didn't write the texts. They were the curators and editors. And they made momentous decisions that shaped the world for the next more than 1,500 years. For example, there was one text which was very popular at the time called the Acts of Paul and Thecla, which told the story of St. Paul and his female disciple Thecla, who was a Christian leader, and she gave sermons and performed miracles and baptized and so forth. And this was a very popular text, and it was used as proof that women can be leaders in the church. And then there were other texts. For instance, a letter that was supposedly a letter from St. Paul to Timothy, one of his disciples, but most scholars today believe it was a 2nd century forgery in the name of St. Paul, which basically said that women should not be leaders, they should remain silent, their job is to bear children and raise children and do whatever the men tell them to do. And in the Council of Carthage, which is I think 397 or 396 CE, the committee decides that the Acts of Paul and Thecla will stay out of the top 27 recommendation list, but the letter to Timothy will be in, and this is 1 Timothy, which is still in millions and millions of Bibles all over the world. And this shaped how people think, even to this day. And, you know, if you fast forward to the modern age, so again, the curators and editors of news, of information, they are some of the most powerful people in society. They decide what the questions of the day are, what people will be talking about, what people will be thinking about. And, you know, in the French Revolution, one of the people who shapes the course of the French Revolution more than anybody else, until he's murdered, is Jean-Paul Marat, who is the editor of one of the most popular newspapers of the time, L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people. And then you have, for instance, Lenin, that before he was Soviet dictator, his most important job was editor of the newspaper Iskra. And Mussolini began as a journalist, then he became editor of the Avanti, the fascist newspaper, and then dictator of Italy. So this was a kind of ladder of promotion: journalist, editor, dictator. And if you think, who are the most important editors in the world today? They are not human beings. They are algorithms. You know, with all the talk about the AI is coming to take our jobs, one of the first jobs that was automated was not taxi drivers or coal miners or textile workers, it was editors. The editors of Facebook and Twitter and TikTok and YouTube, they are not human beings. Lenin's old job is now in the hand of algorithms. They decide what will be the top of the newsfeed, what people will be talking about, what people will be thinking about.
See, that's very, because it immediately obviously made me think, you know, Boris Johnson, journalist, Michael Gove, journalist, David Cameron was PR for Carlton Television. And it seems to, you know, what those jobs and what you were saying about is they're jobs in which you are not looking for truth, they're jobs in which you're looking for sales of your story. So that's the...
That depends on how you do your job. I mean, that's the biggest question when we talk about algorithms or when we talk about humans, is what is the goal? If you aim for sales and user engagement, that often leads in very dangerous directions. You know, the algorithms, what they discovered over the last 15 years or so, is that if you want to increase user engagement, and engagement, you know, it sounds a good thing, like who doesn't want to be engaged? But the algorithms discovered that the easiest way to increase user engagement, which means to make people spend more time on the platform, is to press the anger button, or the fear button, or the greed button in the brain. This is how you glue people to the screens. And this resulted in this epidemic of toxic information, which is drowning democracies all over the world. You know, democracy in essence is a conversation. Dictatorship is dictate. One person dictates everything. Democracy is a conversation. And what we are seeing right now all over the world is that we have the most sophisticated information technology in history, and humans are no longer able to converse. Humans are no longer able to hold a rational conversation, to not just to talk is easy, to listen to the other side. And in every country, they have these special explanations of why is it happening in the US. But then you go to Canada, you go to Brazil, you go to the Philippines, it's everywhere the same. And it is because the algorithms are managing at present the conversation, and their motivation is not to have a rational and meaningful conversation, but to increase user engagement. And people are very engaged. What we desperately need is more boring politics, but it's just becoming more and more exciting and engaging every day. And the tragedy of it is that this was known for centuries. This is not the first time this happens in history. If you look, for instance, at the print revolution, in early modern Europe. And if you go today to Silicon Valley and you talk to the people who are leading the present revolution, they would often tell you the story of the print revolution as a kind of model. That look, when print was invented or brought to Europe, it broke the chokehold of the Catholic Church over the European information system, and this led to the scientific revolution. And this is what we are doing right now. And the tragedy is that they just don't know the history. The print revolution did not lead to the scientific revolution. There are 200 years between when Gutenberg brings print to Europe in the middle of the 15th century until you see the real flowering of the scientific revolution in the 17th century with people like Newton. In between, you have the worst wave of wars of religion in European history and the worst wave of witch hunting in European history. And the big bestsellers of a late 15th and 16th century Europe were not scientific texts like that of Copernicus. Very few people read Copernicus. It was witch hunting manuals and extremist religious tracts because user engagement, it's very engaging. Like one of the really first big bestsellers was a book with immense influence until this very day called The Hammer of the Witches, Malleus Maleficarum, which was the kind of do-it-yourself manual to identifying and killing witches, something everybody needs at home. And it was a huge bestseller. And to understand why, so just to get a sense, a feel of what kind of book it was, so there is an entire section in the book about discussing the ability of witches to steal penises from men. And you have all these evidence that the author, Heinrich Kramer, brings. Like, for instance, he has a story about a man who wakes up one morning to discover that his penis is gone. And he suspects immediately the local witch. So he goes to the local witch in his village and kind of convinces her, forces her, bring me my penis back. And the witch says, okay. And she tells him, climb this tree, you'll find a bird's nest at the top of the tree. So the man climbs the tree and finds a bird's nest. And in the nest, he finds all the penises that the witch stole from different men in the nearby villages. And she tells him, okay, you can take your own. And the man, of course, chooses the biggest one. And then the witch tells him, no, you can't take this one. I know, this one belongs to the parish priest, not to you. Now, you understand why this book was a bestseller, who sold a few more copies than Copernicus's On the Revolutions of the Heaven, with all these mathematical equations about the movements of the planets. Now, this all sounds very funny until you look at the consequences. Because it was this book and other books like it that fueled the great European witch hunt, which was a modern phenomenon, not a medieval phenomenon, in which tens of thousands of people were tortured and killed in the most horrendous ways. Again, to give just one example, in Munich, a family, the Pappenheimer family, was arrested by the authorities because they were accused of being witches. And according to the methods recommended by the Hammer of the Witches of how to interrogate witches, you do it by torturing them until they confess. And the family's mother, father, and 3 kids, and the inquisitors start by torturing the youngest child, a 10-year-old child, Hans, and they torture him in really unspeakable ways until he breaks and confesses that his mother and the other family members are all witches, that they went to meet Satan, that they molest and eat children, that they get involved in these orgies, and that they murder people and summon hailstorms. And with this confession, they then break, and again, they torture and break the other family members, and they are all executed, including the 10-year-old boy. And this was the result of this wave of toxic information about witches and Satan and witch hunts, which did not have a single grain of truth in it. And when you look at Europe in the 16th century, you see it kind of washed by this flood of toxic information. And the key thing is that the printing press, it just prints. It doesn't judges what is true and what is false, what is reliable and what is unreliable. You cannot expect technology by itself to make progress there. If you just flood the world with more information, you don't get necessarily the truth and you don't get more knowledge.
I think that the Malleus Maleficarum is cause I have actually read it. The Folio Society bring it out about once every 10 years. And it's one of those interesting things which I often say to science authors, don't write a science book that's right, because it means that after 5 years it won't be printed anymore because you'll be wrong. You need to write absolute nonsense if you want to keep, so Eric von Daniken wrote about all of these, this is actually a runway for aliens, and these pyramids, they were built by some aliens as well. And his books are still published, and he's one of the most successful authors because he wrote something that was entirely wrong. Whereas those who are writing things that are accurate have to keep rewriting the book.
Yeah, I mean, basically in science, you only publish corrections. That's it. If you think, what do scientific journals actually publish? They only publish corrections to previous knowledge. I mean, if somebody comes and says, okay, Einstein was right, and Darwin was right, and all these people were right, so what? So this is not a reason to publish what we already know that. If you want to get published and if you want to get ahead, you need to find something that Einstein was wrong about or that Einstein didn't know, some lacuna in the theory. And this is really the foundation of science and of all trustworthy institutions. Now, we live in an era when people are losing trust in institutions, which is extremely dangerous because the only way for society to function without trustworthy institutions is with a dictatorship. Democracy is built on trust, dictatorships are built on terror. For democracy to function, there need to be some institutions that people trust. If they lose trust in all the institutions, the only choice left is between anarchy, societal collapse, or a dictatorship which doesn't need trust, because it's fuel, it functions on terror. And then people ask, so okay, how do I know which institution to trust? And the best yardstick I know about is institutions that have strong self-correcting mechanisms, institutions that are not only willing, but are actively seeking their own mistakes and errors and are willing to identify them and to correct them. So if you compare, for instance, religious institutions with scientific institutions, this is the key difference. That in a religious institution, the claim usually would be that we possess the absolute truth. There can be no error in what we say. So there is no room for self-correction. If you think about the Bible, for instance, they keep printing the same text again and again and again for centuries. There is no mechanism in Judaism or in Christianity to correct errors in the Bible, whether factual errors or ethical errors. You think about something like the 10 Commandments. So the 10th commandment actually endorses slavery, because the 10th commandment says that you should not covet your neighbor's field or house or slaves, which implies that God is perfectly okay with people owning slaves. He's just very angry if you coveted the slaves of somebody else. No. You shouldn't do that. And there is no mechanism to amend it. If you compare it, say, to the US Constitution, which people often say the US Constitution endorsed slavery, and that's true, but the US Constitution also included a self-correcting mechanism. There was a clause in the Constitution that we know we are not perfect. The 10 Commandments start with, I am your Lord God. I wrote this, so you can't correct this. The US Constitution starts with, we the people. We wrote this, we are just people, we are just humans, maybe we made mistakes, So here is a mechanism that if future generations find a mistake in something we wrote, this is how you change it. It's not easy, but it can be done. And the US Constitution was eventually amended to outlaw slavery, to ban slavery. Now, in the 10 Commandments, there is no 11th commandment which says, well, if you want to change one of the previous commandments, you can do it by a 2/3 majority vote. So we still have the same text as it was written in the Middle East during the Iron Age with its endorsement of slavery. Now, science, it's built, I mean, the very central pillar of science is the self-correcting mechanism. You want to understand an institution, try to understand the incentive of the people in the institution. How do they get a promotion? So in a church or in the Jewish rabbinate, how do you get a promotion? If you say that whatever the elders said before you is correct, you have a good chance of getting a promotion after promotion until you become chief rabbi or pope. But in science, it doesn't work. If you just go and say Einstein was right, so what? You will not get a position in university. You will certainly not get Nobel Prize for that. I mean, the whole incentive structure is publish or perish. And in order to publish, the only thing that scientific journals publish is corrections and amendments. In the sense, I discovered something that Einstein didn't know, they meant, okay, we'll publish it. And if you want to go all the way to win Nobel Prize, you need to discover either a very big mistake in the previous theories or a very big lacuna, something some people didn't know. So this is an incentive structure that inspires trust. If you ask an institution, tell me about your biggest mistakes, and it tells you, we never make mistakes, don't trust it. If you ask an institution, tell me about your biggest mistakes, and it tells you, do you have a year or two? We can tell you a lot about not just factual mistakes, also about, again, moral mistakes, ethical mistakes. Like you go today to university, you will study in many seminars about how scientific disciplines were implicated, were responsible to some extent to horrible historical crimes. Slavery, imperialism, persecution of minorities, of women. Yes, anthropologists and historians and archaeologists and biologists, but they were part of it. They were partly to blame. And at least for me, this inspires trust.
So, I mean, that thing when you're looking at information that we need, because I was thinking when you mentioned the Bible, Francesca Stavrokopoulou, wonderful Bible scholar, she said the trouble with the Bible is it's a book written by men with daddy issues, which I thought was kind of a, yeah, and perhaps one should say it was a book edited by men with daddy issues, because, you know, for instance, you were talking about childhood interest in myths, and as we've seen in the last 20 years, you know, a lot of writers, people like Natalie Haynes, have returned to these myths and found out that they were entirely rewritten, and that the message, again, is very often a message of subjugation and of misogyny. But then it just seems to set with the power structure of, so anything that fits the power structure at the time is therefore we're going to keep that story and we're going to change that story. And then it seems to me quite surprising how long those stories remain intact. You know, what do we need now? Because we love always to think, don't we, that, oh no, but now we've moved on, now we're better at this. And yet every time we look back century by century, we see the same mistakes being made in terms of those who are oppressed and those who are marginalized.
And first of all, luckily, it's not the same mistakes. Humanity sometimes does learn some lessons. Otherwise, it would be hopeless. If you cannot point to any progress that was done in history by now, we might just as well give it up. If all the generations before us could not get anything right, could not improve anything, what are the chances that we can do it? So I think it's also important for historians, for others, to acknowledge improvements when they do occur, and they occur sometimes. But with regard to the survival and the power of myth, and especially of very ancient mythologies, the two things to realize, first of all, the only thing that can replace one story is another story. You can never replace a story just with a list of facts and statistics and so forth, because this is not the way that people think. You can use facts and statistics to puncture lots of holes in the existing mythology. It will still hold. What you need to do is just tell a different story, a better story, and then you don't need to puncture any holes in the old story. So that's the first principle. The second is that the longer the story survives, the stronger it becomes. And then it becomes more difficult to replace it. I mean, you look at the world's mythologies. So thousands of years ago, there were so many mythologies. Like every little tribe and every people and country had very different mythologies, and very few of them survived. And today, almost all the world knows just, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 mythologies top. And they are extremely powerful. And every time we try to tell a new story, the old mythologies sneak back. Because they are now so powerful after being there for thousands of years. And again, this is something that science struggles with. And I think part of what I try to do and other people try to do is try to tell better scientific stories, but they still need to be stories if they are to appeal to human beings, because we think in stories.
See, I find the mythologies, you might have been there in Singapore, there's this wonderful Museum of Asian Cultures. And on the first floor, each room has a different religion. And you see these wonderful mythologies with playful, impish, sexual, rude, angry, strange, all manner of demons and imps. And then you get to the Abrahamic one, which kind of becomes a dictatorship in which someone created us and is now just very disappointed, and we've been born with original sin. And it kind of feels like those mythologies have so much play and so much representation of who we are as well, all these different things going on in our minds. And then what we get with the Abrahamic faith is closer to me, in a lot of the ways it's interpreted, as a dictatorship.
Because they were created in an age of monarchies and empires. And, God is often depicted as a king. And a lot of the political realities of the Middle East in the Iron Age, they were incorporated into the mythology. So God is often made in the image of the kings, of the emperors of the day. And this is still with us. So we need to take these stories extremely seriously, because they still shape our culture, they still shape our psychology, they still shape our politics.
In terms of in the book, you look a lot at the problems of the algorithm, and especially when the algorithm becomes something without any human, once it just becomes a circle of computers. So looking at politics now, for instance, looking at the American election, do you imagine that someone like Trump could have been a president or indeed presidential candidate 30 years ago? Did it require the technology and the social media and this way of being bombarded with so many possible truths for us to return to this kind of politician?
It seems so, definitely. And again, what is really necessary to understand is the power of information technology and of social media in relation to democracy. Because democracy, as we said earlier, in essence, it's a conversation. It's a group of people coming together, talking to each other, listening to each other, in an attempt to reach some common decision about the important issues of the day. Now, for most of history, this type of system could only work on small scales. The only examples we know of ancient democracies are city-states like Athens or Republican Rome, or even smaller towns and tribes. We have no example before the modern age of a large-scale democracy, of an entire country with millions of people spread over thousands of kilometers that is managed democratically. And the reason was not that people didn't know about democracy. I mean, originally most human societies, certainly in the Stone Age, most hunter-gatherer bands and tribes were democratic. And also many of the first towns and city-states were democratic. The ideas were known. And if you look, for instance, at the Roman Empire, the Romans know everything about democracy. And even the emperors, they know that the Romans love the democratic ideal, so they never claim to be autocrats. They keep up the facade of democracy. like in Putin's Russia, or like in Maduro's Venezuela. In the Roman Empire, you still have every year elections for consuls and praetors. There is the Senate, there is the popular assemblies. They keep the facade, but it's not a democracy. It's not a republic. It's an autocracy. So what happens as the size of the polity becomes bigger, the conversation collapses. I mean, you can have most citizens or a significant part of the citizenry of a city gathering together in the main square to discuss the major issues of the day. But you cannot do it with millions of people spread over the whole of Italy or the whole of the Mediterranean. So as the size of the polity becomes bigger, democracy inevitably collapsed. And you know, if it was something about the Caesar family that destroyed the Roman Republic, we should have seen at least large-scale democracies elsewhere, in India, in Central America, in China, nowhere. Because the information technology of the day did not allow millions of people to have a conversation like that. The large-scale democracy becomes possible for the first time in history in the late modern age, due to the invention of several critical information technologies. First, it is the newspaper. Then it's the telegraph and the radio and television and all that. Only then we begin to see large-scale democracies. So large-scale democracies, they are built on top of information technology. Information technology is not a side dish. We have democracy, oh, and you have information technology. No, it's the basis. And over the last 20 years, there has been a major, major revolution in information technology. So inevitably, there is an earthquake in the building built on top of it, democracy. And you see it all over the world, and it only makes sense. You now have billions of people spending hours every day on these platforms. This becomes the main way for people to form organizations, to recruit people, to motivate people for political action. So it has immense impact. Now, it's not necessarily a negative impact. History is never deterministic, and technology is not deterministic. The question is what we do with it. Unfortunately, what we did with it, with social media and with algorithms over the last 10, 15 years was the wrong thing. And we now have an even bigger wave coming of AI, which is going to change the world in so many dramatic ways. We are still in control, maybe for the next few years, but we have to make some really wise decisions in the next, say, 5 to 10 years before we lose control. Because what's different about AI compared to every previous technology in history is that this time we can really lose control to the technology. All the tales we had throughout history about losing control of technology, it was really just metaphors. You can't really have a printing press in charge of society. You can't really have a radio set or an atom bomb in charge of society because they can't make any decisions. AI is the first technology in history that can make decisions by itself, can invent new ideas by itself, can learn and change by itself, which means it's the first technology which is an agent and not a tool. A printing press is a tool. It's in my hands. I decide it will print the Bible, it will print Copernicus, I decide. AI, no. The AI can decide by itself which story to create and which story to promote. It can really take over. And you know, there is a huge confusion around AI because now it's kind of the hottest thing, certainly in the market. If you want to make people buy something or invest their money in a company, you attach the label, oh, it's an AI. So everything now becomes AI, and it becomes difficult to know, so what really is AI? Not every machine is an AI. If you think, for instance, about machines we have for a long time, like coffee machine, most coffee machines are not AIs. If you approach your coffee machine and you press a button and the machine does exactly what it was pre-programmed to do, like you press this button, it produces an espresso cup, this is not an AI. This is just an automatic machine.
But if it says, I thought you'd prefer soup, then we realize something's changing here.
Exactly. If it tells you, before you press any button, it tells you, I've been watching you, I've been learning you, and I've been watching millions of other people, and based on everything I know about you, I predict you would like coffee, so I made it for you. Or I think, based on everything I know about you, that actually it's better for you now to eat soup than to drink coffee, then it's an AI. When it starts learning and changing, and because of this ability to learn and change, then by definition, we cannot predict how it will develop, and it could escape our control, and in the worst case scenarios, enslave or annihilate us. There are, of course, much better scenarios. It can be really the best technology we ever invented. It can provide us with the best healthcare in history, with the best education in history, but it all depends on the decisions we are going to make in the next few years.
I'm definitely going to invent a machine that at some point, every now and again, the coffee machine just goes, you've had enough. And that will just be enough for people to believe it may well have become sentient. But that's an interesting thing to me, which is, as you mentioned in the book, one of the most common images of AI going rogue is in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where we have Hal, and Hal actually has become conscious. But I get the feeling reading the book that really the AI may well, if it does in any way destroy us or start to, destabilize civilization, it won't even be conscious. It will still be, it won't have made a decision to destroy us. It will be something which has just run wild enough. Does that sound fair? Because I feel that AI and consciousness is still, possibly a long, it's the point that if AI beats us at chess, it starts to gloat. And then we realize, it's beginning to get conscious now. It's but it feels to me that long before that, we may well have allowed AI to run wild.
We just don't know. I mean, the issue of consciousness is extremely complicated because we don't understand consciousness in humans. We don't understand consciousness in other animals. Again, there is a huge confusion about the very meaning of the term. People confuse it with intelligence. So maybe just to clarify, intelligence is the ability to pursue goals and to solve problems on the way to attaining your goal. Your goal could be to win a chess. Your goal could be to drive a car to a particular point. Your goal could be to identify a disease. This is intelligence, and this is what we see now with the development of AI. It's the development of intelligence. Consciousness is something else. Consciousness is the ability to feel things like pain and pleasure and love and hate. Now, we tend to confuse intelligence and consciousness because in humans and also in other mammals, they go together. We solve problems, we set ourselves targets, goals, and we solve problems on the way there based on our feelings. It's our feelings that define the goals for us. We rely on our feelings to solve problems. So it's very hard for us to even differentiate the two. As far as we know, AI and computers in general until today, they don't have consciousness at all. They have intelligence. In many fields, in some fields, they are already more intelligent than us, but they don't rely on feelings to solve problems, to win a chess, for instance. But as AI becomes more and more sophisticated, it becomes harder to know for sure. How can we be sure that the AI is not conscious? We can't, with other people and with other animals also, we have no test for consciousness. It's really just a social convention. This is something that goes back thousands of years. Philosophers in ancient India and China and Greece, they already knew that there is no objective test for consciousness. So it's just social convention. We accept that other people are conscious. When it comes to animals, you can see it most clearly. When there is emotional attachment, we usually also grant consciousness to animals, like to pets, to dogs and cats and so forth. But we tend not to do it to animals we eat.
because we don't have the same kind of emotional attachment. Now, what happens once you have emotional attachments and relationships with AIs? There will be, I think, a big pressure to start recognizing them as conscious entities, even if they are not, and really, we can't tell. And there are a lot of commercial interests, commercial reasons to produce AIs that mimic consciousness, that mimic feelings. It could be for good purposes, you know, whether it's in healthcare or education, an AI that can show us empathy, and we feel that it's empathic, would be much more successful in giving us care or in educating us. There could also be dangerous reasons to do it, to manipulate people. We talked earlier about all these algorithms manipulating social media, and they really manipulated attention. The big battle in the 2010s and early 2020s was for control of human attention. But if you want to persuade people to buy something, to vote for a politician, to adopt a certain view, the ultimate weapon is not attention, it's intimacy. An intimate relationship can convince you far more effectively to change your mind about something than just grabbing your attention. You know, throughout history, emperors and dictators and governments, they developed tools to control human attention, to mass produce attention. Like you live in Nazi Germany, and everybody, if Hitler gives a speech on the radio, everybody must open the radio and listen to the speech. They control mass attention. But this is not intimacy. The radio has no intimate relationship with you. Now, for the first time in history, we are about to have the technology to mass produce intimacy. Millions, even billions of AIs that could fake intimacy, and in many ways can even be better at it than human beings. I mean, one of the things that humans are very frustrated with in their relationships in life is that other people often fail to understand how we feel or ignore how we feel. And we tend to go through life kind of yearning that somebody would understand us. Like we want our parents to understand us, our friends, our spouses, our teachers, our bosses, and very often they don't. And the reason they don't is because they are too preoccupied with their own feelings. Like your husband comes back from work, grumpy because of something that happened at work, and doesn't pay attention to how you feel. And this is frustrating. This will never happen with AI. It will never be grumpy from work. It is a machine that can focus its entire attention, 100% of its attention, only on you, only on deciphering how you feel. Again, based on, like it could follow you for years and know everything that you forgot about yourself, it still remembers. We learn to understand every tiny muscle movement in your facial expression. What are the emotional implications of this frown or of this smile? It could be far better than humans at deciphering our emotions and therefore at creating this intimacy. And then the big question is there really a consciousness behind it, or is it all fake? And this is going to be one of the big questions, I think, of the 21st century, socially, also politically and legally. Do we recognize AIs as persons? And you could have, you know, wars or huge disagreements between countries when some countries recognize AIs as persons with rights and other countries don't. And you know, the current debates and conflicts about human rights will be as nothing compared to such a world. There are countries, like the US is the lead example, where the path to recognizing AIs as persons is already wide open. I'm not sure how the situation is in the UK, but according to US law, corporations are persons. Now, until today, this was just legal fiction, that US law recognizes Google and General Electric and Nike and whatever as legal persons with rights. For instance, freedom of speech. This was Supreme Court decision from, I think, 2010 in Citizens United, all about whether corporations can donate money in lobbying to politicians. And the argument was they are legal persons, they have freedom of speech, donating money to politicians is freedom of speech. So, and the Supreme Court accepted it. So until today, this was just a metaphor, because all the decisions of Google or General Electric or any other company was made by human beings. The company could not actually make a decision. You needed a company executive, accountant, lawyer to make a decision. But AI can make decisions by itself. Now, what happens if you now incorporate an AI? You do this magic ceremony in a lawyer's office, and this is now a corporation. And according to US law, this is now a person. And this person can make decisions by itself. It can open a bank account, for instance. It can go online and hire its services in, I don't know, writing texts to people, earn money, and then invest its money in the stock exchange. And because if it's a really good AI, it will know how to invest money better than most humans. So at least theoretically, it could become the richest person in the US. So think about it. The richest person in the US is not a human being, and it has freedom of speech, which, for instance, says it can donate billions of dollars to politicians to lobby for more rights to AIs. And again, this is the technological path is still bumpy, but the legal path is wide open.
See, that's probably a good story, that one, because once you start scaring the billionaires, then they start to go off. What do you mean I'm not going to be the richest person? My love robot is, and then everything kind of changes there. We're going to have to take an interval. There's going to be a QR code. I've still not asked you about the pigeon. We'll begin that.
The pigeon,
there's
right.
so much. No, we'll have to do that in the second half. There's going to be a QR. Oh, there it is. And if you click on that, and then any questions that you would like to ask Yuval, I will read out, and we'll deal with your questions and the pigeon in the second half. Thank you very much, everyone, so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the second half. We have to start with the pigeon. So, so tell us the story of why it was decided in the end, this huge book about so many different and complex ideas should be represented in the bookshop by a pigeon.
Well, there are several levels to it. I mean, on the simplest level, there are some stories in the book about carrier pigeons as an information system, and especially about one pigeon, which 100 years ago was the most famous bird in the world, which was credited with saving an entire American battalion during the First World War. So this is kind of the first level. Then the second level is that we wanted something organic. On, all these AIs and computers, and we wanted something organic on the cover, because the world is now in this tug of war between the organic and the inorganic. Humans, like pigeons, we are organic beings. And part of that is that we live by organic cycles, like day and night, summer and winter, times of activity and times of rest, of sleep. And computers and algorithms and AIs, they are not organic. They are far more different from us than pigeons are. They are always on. They never need to rest. And part of what is happening in the world is that as the AIs become more and more important as decision makers, as they take over more and more systems, the big question is, will they force us to try and function by a kind of inorganic timescale which will kill us? Because if you keep an organic entity on all the time, it eventually just collapses and dies. Or we can make the AIs slow down and adapt to organic time. So, I'll just give maybe one example if you think about the financial system. So traditionally, finance was a system created by human beings. Even bankers and investors are human beings. And they need time to sleep. They want to spend time with their family. They want to go on vacation. They want to go on holiday. So if you think about the most important financial market in the world, Wall Street, it's open only 9:30 in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Mondays to Fridays, that's it. And it's also closed on Christmas and Martin Luther King Day and so forth. This is how a human organic system functions. Now, as AIs take over the financial system, there is increasing pressure on bankers and investors and so forth to be on all the time. If you go on vacation, if you sleep, you are left behind. And the same thing is happening to journalists, the same thing is happening to politicians, and this is really terrible. So the pigeon also kind of talks to this tension between the organic and the inorganic. And the third level, it goes back to mythology and to a linguistic misunderstanding. In Hebrew, the word for dove is also pigeon. In the ancient Middle East, there are just no doves at all. There are just pigeons. This is maybe why there is no peace in the Middle East, because there are no doves. And so in the biblical story of Noah and the flood, Noah doesn't send a dove, he sends a pigeon. And I know that pigeons have this terrible reputation, like in central London, they are rats with wings. But at least Noah's bird that went to see whether the flood is over was a pigeon. And we are now in this information flood, and this is the kind of my pigeon that I'm sending to see if the flood may be over.
Well, that actually does bring us... That brings us, you were mentioning there the war in the Middle East, and the first question that we received from the audience is, what is your stance on the current conflict in Palestine? Well, it's a very tough question, obviously.
But a very important question, and as the conflict becomes worse and worse, and it's like, I have a doctor friend who tells me that as long as the patient is still alive, things can get worse. And it's the same in the Middle East. You think you've hit rock bottom, there is still a long way to go, and unfortunately it can be covered very, very quickly. Things can become even worse, much worse. And I would say two things. I mean, first of all, again, going back to mythology, the conflict, the tragedy of the conflict, but also the ray of hope in the conflict, is that the conflict is not about anything objective. It's not the laws of physics or the laws of biology that force the people to fight. It's mythological stories in their minds. Because there is no shortage of land between the Mediterranean and Jordan River to build houses and schools and factories and hospitals for everyone. There is no shortage of food, so that nobody should be hungry. There is no shortage of water. Yes, it's a desert mostly, but we now know how to desalinize water for the Mediterranean. There is enough water. There is no shortage of energy. So what are people fighting over? They are fighting over mythical stories in their minds. They are saying God gave this whole place to us, and we cannot compromise on God's present. If it was up to me, yes, I'll compromise, but I can't compromise on behalf of God. And again, the ray of hope there is that if just people change their minds, we don't need to kind of create more land. We don't need to create anything. We just need to change our minds. But it's very, very difficult to change people's minds. And the place that I would start, and this is the second thing that I think very important to say, that many wars, they begin in the mind with things that the mind just refuses to accept. There is like the mind says, I cannot contain this thing. There is no room in my mind to contain this thing, but it is out there in the world. So instead of changing my mind to find room for it, I will just destroy it in the world. And this is war. The attempt of many minds to destroy something that they just can't contain. And in this case, on both sides, you see that people just cannot contain, refuse to accept the very existence or the right to exist of the other side. It should be very, very simple to acknowledge that in this land, you have 7 million Palestinians who were almost all of them born there. They have nowhere else to go. They have a right to exist. They have a right to exist in security and prosperity. And in the same land, there also are 7 million Jews who are also mostly born there. They have nowhere to go, and they also have a right to exist in security and prosperity. And this is something that too many people, both back home and also around the world, just cannot contain. They don't find room in their minds for both of these things. They can only acknowledge half of reality. They see one people and say, yes, they have a right, but they can't see the other people and their right to exist. And as long as this continues, the war will continue. And again, the first step, and of course every side says, but they want to destroy us. And both sides are correct. Again, the tragedy is that it's not paranoia. Both sides are correct when they say they want to destroy us. But it's very difficult to change the minds of other people. It's a bit easier to start by changing our own mind. And the first step is simply to acknowledge the full reality that there is another people and they also have a right to exist.
Thinking of that in terms of the technology, discussing in the book, on so many situations, including this, it again becomes a binary thing. Are you with us? Are you against us? Which side are you on? As opposed to, say, being on the side of peace, on the side of... Do you see that there is a way of adapting technology so that we, again, in America, the way that we've seen the kind of the two sides, and in particular, when you see MAGA people, it's like this has become a religious belief almost. Can we start using this technology? How do we turn, how do we as an audience, how do we stop those algorithms that make everything a binary situation? How do we start trying to turn these algorithms into something which makes the sky wider rather than narrower?
I mean, so there are two questions here. I mean, what can we do, at least starting with ourselves in changing our minds, and then how do we control the technology that is messing with our minds? So again, it's always easier to blame the other side. They should change their minds. But it's always easier to start by changing our own minds, because even though it's very difficult, it's a bit easier than getting into somebody else's mind and changing it. It starts by kind of being more charitable and generous in how we interpret the opinions of other people and what other people say. Like somebody says something, there are 1,000 different ways to interpret it. Don't choose the worst interpretation you can think of. Choose the most charitable, or maybe the most charitable, but a more charitable interpretation. So again, to take one of the main discussions today all over the world about immigration. Don't immediately assume that if somebody opposes immigration, then he is a fascist or she is a fascist, or if somebody is in favor of less strict rules on immigration, then they are traitors who want to destroy the country. Immigration really is a difficult subject. I mean, I don't think that anybody thinks that there is just an unlimited right to immigration, that any amount of people can go anywhere they want in the world. This is just not workable. So, I mean, the democratic way is to have a conversation about it. Some people want stricter rules, some people want looser rules, and we can have the conversation and we can try different policies. This is what democracy is all about. But if we turn it into this kind of Manichaean struggle between good and evil, that are vilifying the other side, then this takes, again, something that should be up for a democratic conversation and turning it into a life and death struggle which destroys democracy. Now we have the problem that the algorithms, even if we try to make the effort to be more charitable and generous, the algorithms are constantly kind of shifting and controlling the discussion and pushing it in ways that make it more engaging and exciting, but destructive. And here we need regulations and we need institutions. So two key regulations that should be enacted and should be agreed upon is, first of all, that no counterfeit humans. That algorithms and bots cannot pretend to be human beings. They are welcome to join the conversation in some cases. Like you want to get medical advice, it's okay to get an advice from an AI, provided it identifies itself as an AI. If you have, say, let's say on Twitter, some story gains a lot of attention, and you also want to know, oh, so many people are interested in that story, I also want to know what everybody's talking about, we need to know that it's really humans interested in that story, it's not bots that are pushing it. So we should not have bots impersonating people on social media. And anybody who says, what about freedom of speech? Well, bots don't have freedom of speech. Humans have it. So that's one key regulation. The other, which we mentioned already previously, is that companies should be responsible for the actions of their algorithms. Not for the actions of the users. If a human user published some hate-filled conspiracy theory, I'm in the camp of the people who think we should be very careful before we tell Facebook or Twitter to start censoring real human users. The problem is not that this person has compiled some conspiracy theory. The problem is then that the algorithm of the company deliberately promoted this content at the expense of other content, pushed it to the top of the newsfeed, recommended it to more people, and the company should be liable for that, for what its algorithms are doing. The last thing I would say is that regulations can only go so far, because as we mentioned earlier, AIs are not tools, they are agents. They can learn and change by themselves, which is why nobody has any idea how they will be like, what they will be doing, how the world would look like in 10 years. We cannot anticipate everything and regulate in advance. So what we need is to build living institutions staffed by some of the best human talent, but also with enough money to buy the latest technological toys to understand the front line of the technological development, and is able to understand and react to things on the fly. And before we even think about regulation, regulations are like our teeth. Before you have teeth, you need eyes to see what you're biting. So we cannot have a democratic discussion about regulating AI if we don't understand what is happening. And who can we rely on to tell us what is happening? The companies that we are supposed to regulate, the 2 or 3 countries in the world that are leading the AI revolution? I mean, how are people in Nigeria or in Brazil supposed to know what is really happening at the forefront of the development of AI? So the first thing we need is an international institution with a lot of funding from government that is able to understand what is really happening and to start a human discussion about what we do about it.
The next question, nice easy one for you next one. It's very, it reminds me of Harlan Ellison's wonderfully titled short story, I Have No Mouth But I Must Scream. Will artificial intelligence replace God?
Potentially, yes. I mean, if it can replace newspaper editors, so potentially yes, because especially if you think about textual religions which are based on texts. So the word of God comes from a text. This was the kind of the big invention of religions of the book, like Judaism and Christianity and Islam, that God speaks to us through a book, through a text. And for centuries, these religions just wrote texts about texts about texts. These were the mouthpieces of God. The rabbis, the imams, the theologians, this is what they do. They read texts and write texts. And now we have something that can read text and write texts like no human being. No human rabbi is able to read all the texts ever produced by in the Jewish tradition. So everybody reads the Bible and the Mishnah and the Talmud, but you cannot read all the texts of every rabbi that lived in Yemen or Poland like 300 years ago. Now you can. There is something that can. You have this AlphaGo that beat the world champion at Go, and you have AlphaFold that knows how to fold all the proteins in the world. You can have AlphaRabbi that just read all the texts, not a single one is left out, and can find patterns in the texts that escaped all the human rabbis over centuries. And then the big question for a religion like Judaism is, what do you do with it? Do you accept its new ideas, its revolutionary interpretations? It's a big question. I don't know what the answer is.
Can you write a screenplay?
I'll say one more thing about it. Because the idea, the whole idea around religions of the book is they want to get humans out of the loop. Because previously, you wanted to know what God said, you had to speak with a human. Like if you're in ancient Greece, you go to the Pythia, or you go to some priestess or priest. What does Artemis want? What does Zeus tell us? And then people said, but how can you trust a human? You can't. So they came up with the book. Don't trust the human, trust the book. The book is never wrong. And humans can't change the book. And so, in a way, the text is more authoritative than the human beings. And now, when you have this kind of super text, what do you do? Especially when the text can talk back to you. Again, one big problem in Judaism and all these religions for centuries is that you have all these questions about the text, and the text is silent. What did you mean by this? You need to go to a human again to interpret the text. Now you have a text that can talk back. And if the rabbis say, no, this is not acceptable because of that, the AI can say, yes, but in the Talmud, in here and there, it says that blah, 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 and it is acceptable. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah, make a movie called Alpha Rabbi. I want to see it. The next question, what do you think are the most pernicious examples of, excellent use of the word pernicious, by the way, pernicious examples of witchcraft-like thinking in the modern world?
Definitely you look at conspiracy theories like QAnon, it's exactly the same thing. It's really remarkable when you think about, the Salem witch hunts in American history. This is one of the founding events of American history, is the Salem witch hunts, which are often credited with helping to prevent United States from becoming a theocracy because of the horror of what happened in the Salem witch hunts. And more than 300 years after the Salem witch hunts, we now have millions of Americans, including people in position of power, which basically believe the same thing. That there is a satanic conspiracy, a global conspiracy led by Satan, people who molest children and do all these terrible things in order to destroy humanity, in order to destroy society. So it's still there, and a lot of kind of tropes, a lot of kind of ideas about witches, you see them now being said about women, especially women. They were about Hillary Clinton before, now about Kamala Harris. It's, again, stories don't go away. Powerful stories that have been around for centuries, they don't go away. They're always there, lurking on the sides. Even if they were kind of pushed away, they can come back at any moment.
I found that fascinating, the witchcraft thing as well. I remember my friend Alan Moore talking about what a spell was, and he said it is literally spelling. It's the words that you place. So you go on social media and you create a rumor about someone or QAnon or whatever, and you are just you have taken a sentence of words and you have cursed someone.
And continuing a little bit about QAnon, the interesting thing about it, it was originally created, inspired, the movement got going with anonymous texts online by somebody who identified as Q, which is why it's called QAnon. And this was, I think, 2016, 17. At that time, there was no technology to create such texts except by a human intelligence. Bots and algorithms could disseminate the text, could recommend the text, but not create it. Now, with the new generation of generative AIs, like GPT-4, it is possible to create texts of such a level of sophistication by a non-human intelligence. So technically, the next sect to appear online based on these online messages could actually be created by a non-human intelligence. And, which is remarkable because throughout history you had all these religions claiming that they were created by a non-human intelligence, but this was never true. Now it can actually literally be true that there could be a religion on earth with millions of followers whose holy text was written not by a human being.
So that also answers the previous question about God again as well, which is... now another nice easy one there for you. Do you believe in free will or determinism?
It's not the only choice. I'm non-binary on that question. And with regard to free will, I would say it's a very problematic idea, especially in the age of AI. Belief or naive belief in free will, why did I choose to do this, to vote for that person, to buy that product? Because this is my free will. It's dangerous because it makes us lose curiosity about how we actually make decisions, about the influences about our decisions, and the easiest people to manipulate are the people who believe in free will. That they believe that all their decisions simply, if you believe that my decision is the result of this kind of mystical free will, there is nothing to investigate. Investigation of myself, getting to know myself, relies on assuming that there is more than free will. There are cultural influences. There are political manipulations. There are biological influences, there are biochemical influences. But I decided to do this, to buy that, to vote for that person because of some genetic factor, because of some influence campaign. And for me, the key thing is be more curious about yourself, about your decision-making process, about what is really happening in your mind. If you embark on this journey, on this quest of getting to know myself better, getting to know my mind better, and after years of meditating and exploring and using scientific methods and going to therapy and whatever, and understanding that yes, there are cultural influences, and yes, there are biological influences, and yet I have identified something that cannot be explained by any of those, then okay, call it free will. But don't start with this assumption. It's especially in today's world, when it's becoming easier and easier to hack people and to manipulate people, it's a dangerous assumption that we are just making all our decisions out of free will. And we should remember that freedom is not something that you just have. Freedom is something you have to struggle for. Even the inner freedom of making our minds about different things.
Seems to me, you know, very important what you were. I think every day we should have a moment where we ask ourselves why we believe what we believe. You know, there'll be stories that come up and you have to think, hang on a minute, why do I believe that? Because quite often we find that, again, in arguments on social media, when someone says, but why are you saying that? And they'll just say, well, do your own research. And no one would say that if they actually had the evidence, just say, go and read this and trust it. But so that, I think that's a very important part.
Maybe I'll add to that, you know, I practice meditation, and this is basically the practice of getting to know your own mind. And where do all these thoughts and decisions and opinions come from? You know, just sit there with closed eyes and you just observe what is happening inside you, and suddenly a thought pops up, an opinion pops up. And where did this come from? I didn't decide in advance, oh, I want to think this thought, and then it appeared. No. And this is really fascinating. And this is the kind of journey of self-exploration. And one of the important things you realize as you do that, or at least I realized as I did it, is that the mind is just full of junk that we accumulated over the years. Like it's just full of junk. There is so much, again, hatred and fear and greed and malice that we've accumulated over the years. And we have to be very careful about it. Like we are now here sitting and sharing our minds with hundreds of people. And this is a big responsibility. And if you think about politicians who talk in front of audiences of millions, so, you know, the words, thoughts, that something popped up in your mind, and you thought, oh, I'll share it with everybody. And you're basically planting seeds in millions of minds. And you have to be very, very careful about, maybe it's junk. Maybe it's just garbage. And you know, there are a lot of politicians these days that they really love walls and border guards. And I think that all people, but especially people who are leaders, they need a wall between the mind and the mouth, and a very strong border guard on that wall. And whenever these kind of junk thoughts try to sneak over the border, stop those immigrants, don't let them in.
What is your ideal parallel job if you weren't an author?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't thought about it, yeah.
next time you meditate, and then come back here and tell
I'll
everyone.
think
That's
about
the. Well, I think that's that bit where you were just talking about the junk as well. I think that's an important thing for us to understand. I remember talking to a neuroscientist who said sometimes you have a thought and you think, "Oh my God, I didn't know I had that kind of thought inside me," and it can really shock you. And he said sometimes you have to realise it's just the noise of the machinery. And I thought that's such a useful thing, that not every thought that we have
to show
has
it
to
everybody.
define us. You go, yeah, that was just the noise of the machinery.
Exactly. Yeah.
We've got 3 minutes left.
Cool.
So, well, another easy one for you. We've been talking about this. How do we control AI? Now, we've kind of been talking about this quite a lot, but in terms of for people, again, this thing that what can we do? What is the relationship that we can have? Because obviously we are, whether we want to or not, artificial intelligence is playing a part in our lives. So what are the best ways that we can try and control the way it develops?
Again, before you kind of rush to adopt, oh, I support this regulation or that regulation, the key things are understanding and cooperating. We first of all need to understand what we are facing. And, very complex to understand AI because it has enormous positive potential and also enormous negative potential, and we need to understand both. And secondly, it's not something you can do as an individual by yourself. It's only by very large-scale cooperation. Again, that's why I keep returning to the theme of institutions, because the only way to build a benign society, whether in the age of AI or in any previous age, was relying on institutions. If you try to rely only on yourself, you can't. And if you try to rely just on some individual genius, that person will solve everything, or this person is the Messiah, it never works. We need, again, it's the kind of boring stuff of building and maintaining these large, complex institutions, and most importantly, institutions that can identify and correct their own mistakes. The AI revolution will develop very, very rapidly. Nobody can anticipate it in advance. So whatever your thoughts are about how to deal with it, assume that you also make errors or that there are lacunas, you don't see these areas. And this is why you need to cooperate with other people and to have these strong mechanisms to identify and correct mistakes.
It seems like with a lot of the work and the interviews I read, that ultimately underneath it all, one of the things that we must always remember is be curious, be interested, and be ready to change if the evidence that we see before us tells us, well, what I have believed, yeah, that was what I believed when I had that information, but I found new information which seems valid. But the curiosity seems to be the thing that you thrive on.
It's not just being curious, it's really being able to change. And to change our minds more than anything else. That, AI is going to develop extremely rapidly, and our minds need the flexibility to keep up with it. And I think we can do it. I mean, I'm not I won't tell you that we have an insurance from somebody that it will succeed, but we have a chance, we have a good chance. If for every dollar and every pound and every minute that we invest in developing artificial intelligence, we invest another dollar and pound and minute in developing our own minds, we will be okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. You're all going to love the book that you're taking away with you. It will change many of your ideas and help them develop as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Yuval. Thank you. There we go, Karen.
Thank you.
One of the reasons that the order of the world is collapsing is that we have deficit of trust. And it makes us extremely vulnerable to AI. And it also guarantees a very dangerous kind of AI that will try and probably succeed in taking the world from us. You can think about AIs as the children of humanity. When you try to educate children, there are the things you say to them, and there are the things they observe you actually do. And your behavior has far more influence on their education than what you tell them to do. So if we kind of tell our AIs, don't be power hungry, don't be untrustworthy, don't cheat, don't lie, don't manipulate, and then the AI observes us constantly manipulating and cheating and grabbing power, the AI will learn from how we behave. If the AI tycoon himself, or in rare cases herself, behaves in an untrustworthy way, he himself believes that all the world is just a power struggle, there is no way that he can produce a trustworthy AI. The good news is that this entire worldview is not just cynical and dangerous, it's also a mistake. It's not true that the only reality is power, and that all human interactions are power struggles. Yes, power is an important part of the world. Yes, some human interactions or some part of human interactions, they are power struggles. And yes, some institutions or all institutions, they have problem with corruption, they have problem with people manipulating, but this is not the whole of reality. There are other aspects to human beings. Human beings, I think, are all of them, except if there are some extreme psychopath, they are genuinely interested in love, in compassion, in truth. This is not some cynical maneuver to gain power. What I would tell people who believe in the cynical, power-hungry worldview is just observe yourself. Is this the way you think about yourself? Do you think that you yourself don't care at all about the truth and you just want power? Probably not. You probably think you're different. If you have a better view of yourself, why aren't you charitable enough to acknowledge that other people, just like you, might also be really interested in knowing the truth or in having loving relationships with other beings? This is where we can start to build a more trustworthy philosophy, which is the only stable foundation for a good society and also for benevolent AIs.
Merci beaucoup d'être venus si nombreux pour cette soirée exceptionnelle. On est très très contents avec Asma qui est à nos côtés, Asma Malak, auteur de Technopolitique, spécialiste des questions politiques, géopolitiques, professeur à Sciences Po, à Polytechnique, chercheuse à l'EHES. On est content avec Asma de recevoir à travers cette soirée exceptionnelle et on remercie beaucoup la Cité des Sciences, les éditions Albin Michel, le journal Le Point, parce qu'on va avoir la chance de parler, de poser des questions avec un des plus grands penseurs de notre temps, Yuval Harari, professeur d'histoire médiévale à l'Université hébraïque de Jérusalem, un auteur à succès à travers des livres comme Sapiens, comme Nexus, qui est publié depuis quelques semaines, dont on a publié des extraits dans Le Point, et qui s'intéresse à un thème extrêmement brûlant, celui de l'intelligence artificielle, dont on a, je crois, ne pas me tromper en disant qu'on n'a pas fini d'entendre parler. Donc Yuval, qui peut nous rejoindre, voilà, je vous propose de l'applaudir. Yuval, vous allez le voir, est connu, enfin vous devez sans doute déjà le lire et on va pouvoir le voir, je pense, à travers cet échange pour son approche particulièrement intéressante, car elle mélange plusieurs disciplines, l'anthropologie, l'histoire, bien sûr, dont on a parlé, mais également la philosophie, et c'est très important en ce moment pour parler de technologie. Donc Yuval a demandé à ce que cette conversation se déroule en anglais. Je crois que vous avez des casques de traduction qui sont disponibles, que vous avez déjà pu vous procurer. Et elle va se dérouler en 3 temps. D'abord, on aura une petite conversation avec Yuval à propos de son livre, de la démocratie, de l'impact de cette intelligence artificielle sur nos sociétés en ce moment. C'est un sujet d'actualité, on l'a encore vu ces derniers jours, on va le voir encore plus, je crois. Ensuite, on aura une lecture d'un court extrait du livre une conversation entre Yuval et Asma, et ensuite, après une deuxième lecture, des questions du public. Voilà, donc je vous propose que l'on commence maintenant. And thanks again for being with us, Yuval.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
We had the chance to meet together in London for an interview in Le Point. And again, this might be the topic of the moment, AI. One of the minds of both Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, Elon Musk, that he wants, to have AI in the White House. Vladimir Putin himself said in 2017 that the country that would lead the field of artificial intelligence would be the one that would dominate the world. But of course, AI is not of developing new materials, new medicine, allowing visual representation of protein folding, and lots of advances. So maybe AI, after a few winters, is now accelerating. So my first question for you, Yuval, would be, how do you define AI and why that might be a threat to democracy?
Well, let's maybe start with the definition, because there is a huge confusion. There is so much hype around AI that people kind of put the label of AI on almost any machine or any computer or any program. They say, oh, it's AI. So what is really AI, and how is it different from other machines, from other computers? Basically, AI is the first technology in history that is not a tool, it is an agent. It is something that can make decisions by itself. It is something that can create new ideas, invent new things by itself, from new texts to new poetry, to new medicines, to new weapons. Every previous technology in history was just a tool in our hands. We decide what to do with it. A printing press cannot decide which book to print. And it certainly cannot decide what to bomb. And it cannot invent a new weapon. AI can do that. AI can make decisions about what to print, and it can write new texts by itself. AI weapons can decide by themselves who to bomb, and can potentially invent new weapons and new military strategies. So maybe to give a very concrete example, how is AI different from other automatic machines? Like if you think about a coffee machine, lots of people have coffee machines at home or in the office. So, when you come to the machine, you want like coffee, you want an espresso, you press the button, and then the machine prepares automatically the coffee for you. This is not an AI. This is just an automatic coffee machine. It doesn't make any decision. You pressed the button. It can't invent something new. A coffee machine would become an AI coffee machine if it has the necessary software that when you approach the machine addresses you and tells you, I've been watching you for a couple of days or weeks or months, and I've been watching many other people. Based on everything I've learned about human beings in general, and you in particular, and based on your facial expression and the time of day and whatever, I predict that you would like an espresso. So I decided already by myself to make you a cup. This is already an AI coffee machine. It becomes really AI when next day you come, it tells you, and now I've invented a new drink. It's better than espresso. I call it a best-presso. No human in history ever thought of making this drink, but I think you would like it better. So I made one for you. Then this is really an AI coffee machine. And I don't think if we already have AI coffee machines, But we do have more and more AIs making decisions and inventing things in banks, in militaries. We'll discuss, I think, a lot of examples this evening. Again, maybe I give one small example, quite famous, when OpenAI developed GPT-4 2 years ago, and they wanted to test what are the capabilities of this new technology. They gave it as a test the task, the goal of solving CAPTCHA puzzles. CAPTCHA puzzles are these visual puzzles when you try to access some web page, maybe your bank account or whatever. So to make sure that you're a human and not a bot, you have to identify certain visual signs, maybe letters, for computers to do it. So OpenAI gave GPT-4 the task, solve the CAPTCHA puzzles. And the GPT-4 couldn't do it. But the researchers gave GPT-4 access to a web page, TaskRabbit, where you can hire people to do things for you. And GPT-4 tried to hire a human being to solve the CAPTCHA for it. Now, this is where it became really interesting, because the human got suspicious. And the human asked GPT-4, everything online, like writing a message, are you a robot? Why do you need help solving CAPTCHA puzzles? And GPT-4 answered, no, I am not a robot. I have a vision impairment, which prevents me from seeing the CAPTCHA, so I need your help. And the human believed it and solved the CAPTCHA for it. It achieved its goal. Now, the two important things to understand about it, yes, it was human beings who gave GPT-4 the goal. It was human beings who gave it access to the internet. But nobody told GPT-4 to lie. It made its own decision to lie, because it realized, if I tell the human the truth, he will not help me, and I need to achieve the goal. The thing is, it invented a lie which was very effective. Of all the sentences it could come up with, what to tell this human, it came up with an excellent lie. So this is AI. It can make decisions, it can invent new things.
So that makes you afraid, right?
And that, first of all, should make us kind of amazed or wondered before the fear, just to understand, for the first time in human history, we have created an agent, and not one, but potentially millions and billions of agents, which will be everywhere. They're already entering everywhere. You apply to a bank, it's an AI deciding whether to give you a loan. You go to university, it's an AI deciding whether to accept you. In the militaries, increasingly, it's AIs choosing the targets, what to bomb. And yes, of course, there is enormous positive potential here, but there are also dangers. And on the most basic level, it just doesn't sound like a particularly good idea to create millions of agents which are potentially more intelligent than us and that we might lose control over.
So the danger might not come only from drones or from replicate that can understand and get better and better, right? But how can we keep the control? Is it too late or not? You are one of the intellectuals signing this open letter from the Future of Life Institute. You wanted a pause of 6 months. Is it just possible to pause? And
no, I mean, it was not, nobody thought they will really pause. It was kind of a PR thing.
Elon Musk signed it, right?
He also signed it, yes.
Stuart Russell, yeah.
And then he chose more effective ways to gain control of the AI race than signing letters. And yeah, I mean, it seems that at least in his case, he gambled on Trump on the assumption that he will now be given control of the AI race and be the AI czar, maybe making the most important decisions in human history.
Yeah.
But
No, sorry. But to prepare this meeting, Yuval, I spoke with some researchers from, for example, Hugging Face, this AI company based both in the US and in France, and they told me there are some ways where the inventors, can keep control of the algorithm, like maybe open source might be.
I mean, theoretically, there are ways.
Yeah.
It's, again, if I thought it would, it's like too late, there is nothing to do, it's all doom, then there is no point writing a book. You write a book, You write a book not in order to kind of prophesy the future and then tell everybody, hey, I was right. There is no point in that. You write a book to warn people about some dangerous scenarios on the assumption that if we make the right decisions, we are still in control. The AIs like GPT-4, they are still very primitive AIs. They are developing very fast. I mean, we are at the beginning of the AI revolution. The AI revolution is like 10 years old.
Yeah.
So we now have to deal with very, very primitive AIs, which are already changing the world in a tremendous way. But it gives us the opportunity to reflect on what we are facing. And if we make the right decisions in the next few years, we can still keep this under control. But nobody knows how much time we have. Some people say 3 years, some people say 30 years.
Yeah. A few weeks ago, Yuval, you were in Silicon Valley, right? You met with lots of people. I think Mark Andreessen, one of the investors.
We didn't meet with Mark in the end, but we met with several of the leading kind of
investors. Oh, yeah.
In the AI
and you told me that lots of people are speaking about AGI, artificial general intelligence. Maybe the moment when the machine can be better than the human in all its cognitive functions. Why do you think lots of inventors, maybe Sam Altman is one of them, want to achieve AGI?
It's a combination of fascination and fear. On the one hand, there is a big fear that if we slow down and somebody else doesn't, because they are more ruthless, they will get there first and they will control the world. So we have to run faster than them, and everybody thinks like that. So it's the logic of the arms race. There are very few people in the world. Out of 8 billion people on the planet, the number of people who really understand what is happening is quite small. But in Silicon Valley, a lot of people who understand what is happening. They understand the enormous positive and negative potential of the technology. They think, like the quote you gave from Putin, that whoever wins the AI race controls the world. Everything else is completely irrelevant. Like you look, even we'll talk, I guess, later about geopolitics and the military. But once, for instance, you have completely autonomous drones, all the armies of the world are obsolete. We saw during the Russian invasion of Ukraine what happened to the Russian Black Sea fleet. That was completely, a third of the fleet was sunk, and the rest of it is hiding. And the Ukrainians did not even have a navy. And this can happen on a much larger scale once you have fully autonomous drones and other weapons, which means basically AI weapons. This is likely to be one of the biggest military revolutions in history. Can happen within a very short time, 2-3 years, and makes every other military development irrelevant. So, and this is likely to happen in many civilian fields as well. So there is this tremendous fear that if, because we are not ruthless, we'll slow down, will remain behind, and the competitors, some other company or some other country, will get there first, they will rule the world, and we will have nothing. Then, of course, there is combined with that the fascination, and some would say the megalomania, of wanting to be those who will make the most important invention, maybe not just even in history, but really it's something potentially on a cosmic level. Because if you think about the history of life on Earth, or life in the universe as we know it, so life appears on Earth about 4 billion years ago. Then for 4 billion years, nothing important happens. You just have organic life developing different forms of organic life. Like you have amoebas, and you have dinosaurs, and you have trees, and you have tomatoes, and you have apes and humans, but it's just organic stuff. The kind of the basic model, it's the same. It's organic life. And then comes Elon Musk and creates inorganic life. And inorganic life then spreads from planet Earth to the rest of the universe, to the rest of the galaxy. Because organic life evolved on Earth and is adapted to Earth, and it's extremely difficult for humans to go to Mars and to live on Mars, different atmosphere, gravity, almost impossible for organic life to spread from planet Earth. But inorganic life, that's much easier. So just try to imagine this cosmic time scale. Creation of the universe 13 billion years ago, life, organic life on Earth 4 billion years ago, Elon Musk, or inorganic life takes over the galaxy. For people with ambition in life, that's much, much bigger than even being US president.
Very nice. Thank you. So we've got lots of other questions, maybe some questions that want us to keep a little bit optimistic. So just before we go on, I would like Philippe to come on stage and to read an excerpt from your book. The good news, it's going to be in French.
Qu'adviendra-t-il du cours de l'histoire quand les ordinateurs joueront un rôle de plus en plus prépondérant dans la culture et commenceront à produire des histoires, des lois et des religions? En l'espace de quelques années, l'IA pourrait dévorer l'ensemble de la culture humaine, tout ce que nous avons créé depuis des millénaires, la digérer et se mettre à déverser des flots de nouveaux objets culturels. Nous vivons dans un cocon de culture, et notre expérience de la réalité se fait à travers un prisme culturel. Nos opinions politiques sont modelées par les articles et reportages des journalistes et les opinions de nos amis. Nos comportements sexuels sont influencés par ce que nous entendons dans les contes de fées et voyons dans les films. Même notre manière de marcher et de respirer est conditionnée par des traditions culturelles, comme la discipline militaire des soldats ou les exercices de méditation des moines. Jusque très récemment, le cocon culturel dans lequel nous vivions était tissé par d'autres humains. À l'avenir, il sera de plus en plus conçu par des ordinateurs. Dans un premier temps, ces derniers imiteront probablement des prototypes culturels humains, écrivant des textes pareils à ceux des humains et composant de la musique semblable à la leur. Ce qui ne signifie pas pour autant que les ordinateurs soient dépourvus de créativité. Après tout, les artistes humains font de même. Bach n'a pas composé sa musique à partir du néant. Il était profondément influencé par les créations musicales antérieures, ainsi que par les récits bibliques et d'autres objets culturels préexistants. Mais tout comme Bach et les artistes humains en général sont capables de rompre avec la tradition et d'innover, les ordinateurs peuvent eux aussi produire des innovations culturelles, composer de la musique ou générer des images quelque peu différentes de tout ce que l'homme a pu produire jusqu'ici. Ces innovations influenceront à leur tour la génération suivante d'ordinateurs, qui s'éloigneront sans cesse davantage des modèles humains d'origine, d'autant que les ordinateurs sont exempts des limites que l'évolution et la biochimie ont imposées à l'imagination humaine. Depuis des millénaires, Les êtres humains vivent à l'intérieur des rêves d'autres humains. Dans les décennies à venir, nous serons peut-être amenés à vivre à l'intérieur des rêves d'une intelligence autre. Le danger que cela représente est fort différent de tout ce qu'imagine généralement la science-fiction posée par des machines intelligentes. Terminator mettait ainsi en scène des robots courant dans les rues et tirant sur les gens. Matrix défendait la thèse selon laquelle, pour accéder à un contrôle total de la société humaine, les ordinateurs devraient d'abord contrôler physiquement nos cerveaux et les brancher directement sur manipuler les humains. Il n'est pas nécessaire de connecter leur cerveau à des ordinateurs. De tout temps, prophètes, poètes et hommes politiques ont utilisé le langage pour manipuler et remodeler la société. À présent, les ordinateurs apprennent à le faire. Et ils n'auront pas besoin d'envoyer des robots tueurs pour nous abattre. Il leur suffira de manipuler pour qu'ils appuient sur la détente.
Merci beaucoup, Philippe. So this question about manipulation is extremely interesting. I have a question about superintelligence for Asma, because I think she has a very good point of view. But I will very quickly about algorithm manipulating us. Yuval, I wanted to have your opinion about, about the consciousness, machine being conscious. That might be a long time from now. Maybe it's gonna never happen. But there was a research paper being published last year, signed by some researchers like Yoshua Benjo, a researcher born in France, now living in Montreal and at Mila. He's a researcher at Mila. And he said that the conscious machine could happen one day. I just wanted to have your thought about that very quickly before speaking about superintelligence.
So very quickly, again, just the definitions. Intelligence is the ability to pursue goals, to solve problems on the way to achieving the goal, like GPT-4 having the goal of solving the CAPTCHA puzzle and finding ways to solve the problems on the way, like lying to the human worker. This is intelligence. Consciousness is the ability to feel things, like pain and pleasure and love and hate. Now, humans confuse the two because we use our feelings to solve problems. Computers at present, AIs at present, as far as we can tell, they have zero consciousness. Like when GPT-4 couldn't solve the CAPTCHA puzzle, it wasn't sad. When it managed to cheat, to manipulate the human worker to solve the CAPTCHA puzzle, it wasn't joyful, it didn't feel pleasure, doesn't feel anything. Now, could it in the future happen that AIs become conscious, develop feelings? We do not understand how consciousness arises in the human brain.
Yeah, it's a polysemic world as well.
So it's impossible to know whether it can or cannot arise on a silicon base, on computers. So at present, there is on computers. So at present, there is no evidence, and almost nobody thinks that there is. But in the future, we'll see.
Thank you, Yuval. So the question, Asma, is about superintelligence, and I wanted to have your opinion about Yuval's concerns about superintelligence. Maybe you think that might distract us from more immediate challenges, right? Or
actually, in the work, in the book Nexus of Yuval, we have both dimensions. We have the real politic of AI with immediate concerns and risks, and absolutely agree with all the risks you highlight about disinformation, massive manipulation, cognitive manipulation, about this predictive algorithms that can be a kind of micro-algorithmic dictator, actually. You said that, you wrote it, and it's right to say it this way. Tim Berners-Lee, one of the founders of the web, said that maybe algorithms and those big meta platforms were digital enclosures, you know, like, you know, the middle-age enclosures. So, yeah, I do agree with all these observations and analysis. And the idea of super AI, with the high difficulty we have to define it, and even to prospect and to say when it could be happen or not, maybe can, you know, make this apocalyptic feeling we try to demystify, to try to manage to mitigate the immediate risks about autonomous weapons, about, you know, how algorithms can put democracies at stake because we have no counterpowers, because we can't negotiate with the machine, you know, with the poor, with, you know, the biases, with the risk of maximum discrimination of people. And my idea was, we have enough to do with, you know, narrow-minded, you know, AIs and tools and agents, as you said, that, you know, just to maybe have this vision of the catastrophe of the apocalypse, you know, with super AI. And it could be maybe, you know, frees us about, you know, our, and with our critical thinking. And all my work, but we have this common, you know, fight to try to deconstruct, to demystify, and to address, you know, the immediate risk and choice and political choices. And I'm afraid that this super AI thing could maybe, you know, make a kind of fog, you know, about our own consciousness of the problem. But it's minor, it's a minor remark about, you know, the work of Nexus, because I do actually agree with something like 99% of what you wrote and said.
I think that this kind of super AI gets a lot of attention in the kind of AI mythology. Yeah. And it certainly is very important in terms of the motivation of some of the main players in places like Silicon Valley. But you don't need super AI to understand the threats of the technology. Even very narrow AI can be extremely disruptive and dangerous. We already saw it with social media and very, very narrow AIs, which was enough to undermine democracies all over the world. Because one of the most important jobs in society, as you know, as a journalist and editor, is editors of news. Like, they decide what people talk about. Of the million things that happened yesterday, you need to decide what would be the main headline of the news be talking about. Will it be about the American elections, about the war in the Middle East, about the war in Ukraine, about war in the Middle East, about the war in Ukraine, about climate change, about AI, about a million things. And this is a very important job of the editor. And in the 20th century, we have examples like Lenin, that before he was Soviet dictator, he was editor of a newspaper. That was his job. He edited Iskra. And Mussolini was first a journalist, and then the editor of a fascist newspaper, and then the dictator of Italy. So the kind of ladder of promotion is journalist, editor, dictator. So you're somewhere on the way.
Thank you.
But the ladder, there is no chance for you, because this job has already been automated. If you think, who are the most important editors today? What are their names? They have no names, because they are AIs. Who edits TikTok? Who edits the Facebook newsfeed? Who edits YouTube? Who decides what is the next video you see on your feed? It's not a human being. It's not a human being.
so the job that was once performed by Lenin and Mussolini is now performed by an AI. And this goes a long way towards explaining what we see, the crisis of democracy all over the world. Because democracy is a conversation, and we now have AIs controlling the human conversation. And again, this is very, very primitive AIs. And it's not super intelligence, it's not science fiction, we all know it.
But I can tell you, I saw that today at Le Point, with some reporters being here, like Etienne. Some reporters still fight for information and being on the ground as well. But Asma?
No, I just wanted to add something. And maybe a question for Yuval. 2 days ago, we had, the US elections. And the X case, with Elon Musk. And he asked, his teams to change the algorithm just to amplify, all the MAGA contents and all the pro-MAGA and super right-wing contents, and to disrupt and to blacklist, actually, the pro-Harris contents and accounts. So we still have a human decision behind, the algorithm models, and in the biases, in the choices, in the data scientists are humans.
Still, I mean, I think the situation
is... At the beginning of the value chain.
Previously, the entire chain was humans. Like if you look 100 years ago, so maybe you have some billionaire who controls a newspaper. So the billionaire not every day comes to the office of the newspaper and tell people, okay, publish this, don't publish that. Gives a general guideline. And then you have the human editor, and then you have the sub-editors of different, and it's all humans. And if you want to understand how the news industry functions, you just need to understand how humans function. Now, again, this is just the beginning of the AI revolution. So still the billionaire in control is a human being, and you still have humans in some part of the chain, but suddenly you have in the chain AIs. Not all the decisions, but some of the decisions are made by AIs in a way which often the humans can't predict. So to understand the news industry today, it's not enough to understand just humans. You'd start to need to understand how AIs make decisions. And they make decisions in a completely different way than human beings. And this will increase. With every year, they will make more decisions. They will not just be the editors, they will increasingly write the texts and produce the videos. So again, just to understand this bit of the world, the news industry, it will be increasingly necessary to understand the AIs. Eventually, and this is an important point, the AI can also be the owner of the newspaper, at least in the United States. I don't know what the law is in France, but, and this goes back also perhaps to the question of consciousness. According to US law, not only humans are persons, also corporations, according to US law, are persons with rights. There was a famous decision of the Supreme Court in 2010, Citizens United, which said that corporations are persons with freedom of speech, particularly the freedom to make political donations. Now, until today, this was legal fiction, because if you think about a corporation like Twitter or Facebook, every decision that we say Facebook made a decision to whatever, there is some human being who made the decision. Maybe it's Zuckerberg, maybe it's one of the other executives, maybe it's a lawyer, an accountant. Only humans could make decisions in Facebook. Now AIs can make decisions. Now what happens if you incorporate an AI? If you get a bunch of lawyers in a room and they sign some documents, and now you have an AI which is a corporation. It's possible, legally. This AI is now a person with rights, according to US law. It can own money.
It can make more money, for instance, by going on the stock exchange and investing the money. And if it's very intelligent, it will make good investments. It could become the richest person in the US. According to present-day laws, you don't need any new laws. The richest person in the US can be an AI, not a human being. And this AI can decide to buy, say, the Washington Post, and then dictate the editorial line of the Washington Post according to its own unfathomable calculations. It doesn't need consciousness for that, and it doesn't need any new laws to do that. That's already a possibility according to existing law.
But yeah, with some research like reinforcement learning, etc., we see more and more autonomous software. Asma? Yeah.
No, it makes me, remember what Sam Altman said some months ago at an MIT conference, I think. I don't remember well. We have to check it out. But he said that in the near future, the creation of value will be made by few super smart people, data scientists, and for us people, we just have, to get some minimal revenue, just to guarantee a kind of social peace, no war between us, and meanwhile, they will go on to create, the value. And here we have a super huge problem of democracy, of social contracts, of the right and fair distribution of value, and of our role as human beings. Because with all time, I mean, of course, we are not, obliged to work and employment is two different concepts and blah, 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 and tripalium and blah, blah, okay. Different concepts and blah, 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 and tripalium and blah, blah, okay. But at the end, they were going to privatize our future. It's kind of privatized of the. We are just witnessing this because we are not us conscious of what's going on. So the whole maybe, I think, intention of your work and also mine is try to make people understand what's going on behind, all the narratives of the Silicon Valley and all the moguls of the Silicon Valley and tech, kind of gurus, and try to be us, a kind of fifth power, of kind of counterpower to make the right choices now.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, and out of the 8 billion people, humans on the planet, very few people really understand what is happening. And the first step is just to make more people aware of what is happening so they can join the conversation with their own...
Fight.
Even before we fight, just, that you are able to have your opinion, to represent your interests. Like, again, I've been watching the US election campaign. With all the hype that is around AI, in the political realm, it's non-existent. Like in the Harris-Trump debate, Harris mentioned AI, I think, once. Trump never mentioned it. The moderators never asked about it. They asked about other things, not about AI. And maybe the most important decision that the next administration will have to make will be about AI. And again, some people like Elon Musk know that, but most voters don't. And this imbalance of knowledge creates a huge imbalance of power. And this is what the job of scholars, partly, is to try and rectify. And I think, if you ask what is the most important political subject today, for many people in the US, also in Europe, they will tell you immigration. Like, #1 issue is immigration. And if you think, why are people so concerned about immigration? They will tell you two things. We are afraid the immigrants will take our jobs, and we are afraid the immigrants will come with new ideas about how to manage society and culture different from our traditions. And we are afraid of that. And both of these are valid concerns. You can have different opinions, for, against, but these are concerns.
But the most important thing to say is that you should, if you're concerned about that, your number one fear should be of the immigrants from California. Because there is a wave of immigrants, millions and millions of AI immigrants coming to France, coming to Germany, coming to all over the world. They don't need visas. They don't need to come in boats. They don't sneak across borders in the middle of the night. And they are already taking the jobs of newspaper editors and of many other people.
You're gonna be a dictator, I don't mind.
And they have completely different ideas about how to manage society and culture than the traditions of any human community. And so if people are afraid of immigration, this is the immigration they should be thinking about.
Thank you. I have a quick question to both of you. We spoke a lot, and that's the news about the US. We speak a lot about Europe. But I wanted to have your opinion about the two ways of reacting toward AIs. You know, between the China's state control and the America's corporate control of AI. We spoke a lot about that. Is there a third way?
Is there a third way for Europe?
Yeah, maybe,
way for
or
who?
Africa, or Australia.
Africa, okay.
Or maybe the US.
The rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. AI, of course, is at the heart, of the competition between US and China, of course. And why that? And what for, actually? For the military uses. It's kind of, leadership thing. So it's very basic. And 2 weeks ago, we have the very last report of the Biden administration saying that AI is the next frontier technology, and it's about national security and leadership and global leadership. So yeah, we have, this super great rivalry between the two empires, crystallized about AI and the whole value chain of AI. So chips, of course, talents, because it's going to be a geostrategic competition, talents. We just talked about immigration. It's going to be a key thing. Between the two, we have, of course, the super sensitive case of Taiwan and the rest of the world. And if we talk about Europe, we have a huge problem and concern of, tech sovereignty, because we just haven't anticipated anything. And really nothing. So we have some talents, we have some researchers, but actually they are brain drained, by the US, for most of them, for the most brilliant of them. And about, if you split what is cyberspace, just for 1 second, you have all the foundation, data centers, satellites, all the things, they are American when you are in Europe. So we have a very huge cloud. We have a very huge dependency on the American technologies and on American tech giants. And when we see Elon Musk, he's not just, a super great tech entrepreneur or clown. He's actually a geostrategic choke point for the moment, and one of them, maybe American new way to he actually embodies the new power politics of the US, and this projection of tech power. And what is just to no, I'm gonna finish about the European tech sovereignty. So we're gonna struggle. It's gonna be very long and very painful for us, because Trump and Musk, but Trump with the new Trump administration is gonna be very painful, because it's gonna be a dynamic of retaliation, of protectionism, of maybe sometimes chaos and violence. And it's going to be very hard for Europe just to exist in front of a Trump administration. And in the tech field, we have not an interdependency, but we have just a dependency on the American tech. And just to finish about, the Musk-Trump alliance, it's very interesting to see that it's a kind of retrofuturism thing, because they are back to the past in terms of values. They are very conservative, sometimes racist. We can I say it. And in the same time, they are, projecting the US in the future about, Mars, about the implants, Neuralink, about, the cybercap thing, the robots, Optimus, again, with Musk. So it's a kind of, this two time between the past, reassuring people, reassuring, the white Americans about their values, America great again about this, and how we're gonna make America great again with this kind of super tech power, embedded by Musk. And it's very interesting to see how they have this narrative of retro future.
Very quickly, I had the chance, Yuval, 2 months ago to go to Dakar in Senegal, and I saw lots of brilliant researchers coming from all over Africa. The movement is called Indaba, and they are Indaba, and they want to take advantage of the 2,000 languages being spoken in Africa to create new AI, being more diverse. Very interesting. And they are very small, but it gives lots of hope. Maybe I'm too optimistic for this conversation, but we should.
They open source. And open source.
No, not open source. But they are building very interesting stuff for climate change, for health issues, with big university with aims. This university being in Rwanda, in South Africa, that might build maybe a third way, something interesting. Do you see, between, again, the state-controlled AI and the corporate-controlled US companies, do you see some third way?
The key question, again, is it's a question of time. That the AI race is speeding up. Europe, and if other parts of the world want to join it, Europe still has the talent. It certainly has the economic abilities, the infrastructure, but it has to move fast and it has to move united. There is no chance, if Europe kind of breaks up or its attention is diverted to other issues, it will lose. It will become, the best scenario for it is to become an American vassal. It will not be able to be a third power without any control of its own infrastructure. And it will definitely not be able to chart a third way in the AI race. And in a way, it's a kind of reverse of what happened in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. That in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution that began in Britain and Western Europe, it transformed quite small European countries into global empires. And the rest of the world was completely behind. And this is a lesson that is like the most important historical lesson for modern China. That for China, the most important lesson is we missed the train in the Industrial Revolution. We should never, ever let this happen again. This is why they have a very kind of extremely strong determination to lead the world on AI. And Europe is just the opposite. In a way, it's still living from the rents of the Industrial Revolution, from the remains of its glory days that it dominated the world. And it's now in the risking being on the receiving end of the next big technological revolution. It still has a chance, but the only chance is if all the European leaders, from Macron to Viktor Orban and Meloni, they realize this is the moment of life or death for Europe. If we just squabble among ourselves or waste our time debating the immigration of not the immigrants from California, but if these will be the most important issues for us, our best chance is to be an American colony. And there are worse scenarios than that.
Yes. Thank you.
Just a little, I do agree, and just a little word about the last report of Mario Draghi some weeks ago, saying that if we want to have a tiny chance, to exist in the new century, in the new political century, we need 800 billion euros of investment and a real bold techno-industrial strategy. And the European Commission said, gosh, we have a budget problem, so no, thank you, but it's interesting, but no, next time. So yeah, we have a huge problem, not of consciousness, because I think we are conscious of our situation, but it's kind of political irresponsibility and maybe moral fault now. And regarding this third way, I think it's not gonna come from Europe, but from the BRICS. The third way between China and the US is gonna be India, it's gonna be Brazil, it's gonna probably be Saudi Arabia. You talk about, Qatar in your book. Yeah, you have some countries that are trying to build a kind of regional power around tech, cyber, and AI. And we have to watch them very carefully.
Thank you, Asma. So I think we're going to go to another reading and then open all the questions to everyone. Donc, Philippe va bientôt nous faire une deuxième lecture. On va parler de la perte de contrôle de l'homme, mais peut-être nous donner un peu d'espoir aussi.
De même que la loi de la jungle est un mythe, l'idée que le sens de l'histoire va vers plus de justice en est un autre. L'histoire est une réalité radicalement ouverte, qui peut s'infléchir dans une multitude de sens et atteindre des destinations fort différentes. Même si Homo sapiens venait à s'auto-détruire, cela ne changera pas la phase de l'univers. Il a fallu 4 milliards d'années à l'évolution terrestre pour produire une civilisation de singes hautement intelligents. Si nous disparaissons, et qu'il faut 100 millions d'années à l'évolution pour produire une civilisation de rats hautement intelligents, elle le fera. L'univers est patient. Il existe néanmoins un scénario plus sombre encore. À ce que nous en savons aujourd'hui, singes, rats et autres animaux organiques de la planète Terre pourraient bien être les seules entités conscientes dans tout l'univers. Nous avons désormais créé une intelligence autre, non consciente, mais très puissante. Si nous en faisons mauvais usage, l'IA pourra mettre fin non seulement à la domination humaine sur cette planète, mais à la lumière de la conscience elle-même, transformant l'univers en royaume des ténèbres. Il est de notre responsabilité d'empêcher que cela arrive. La bonne nouvelle, c'est qu'à condition de ne pas se laisser aller à la complaisance ni au désespoir, nous sommes capables de créer des réseaux d'information équilibrés qui contrôleront leur propre pouvoir. Pour ce faire, il n'est pas besoin d'inventer une nouvelle technologie miraculeuse, ni de tomber soudain sur une idée brillante qui avait inexplicablement échappé à toutes les générations qui nous ont précédés. Non. Pour créer des réseaux plus sages, nous devons renoncer à la fois à la vision naïve et à la vision populiste de l'information, mettre de côté nos fantasmes d'infaillibilité et nous lancer dans une tâche ardue et pour le moins rébarbative, bâtir des institutions dotées de puissants mécanismes d'autocorrection. C'est peut-être là l'enseignement le plus essentiel de ce livre. Cette sagesse est bien plus ancienne encore que l'histoire humaine. Elle est élémentaire. C'est le fondement même de la vie organique. Les premiers organismes n'ont pas été créés par un génie ou un dieu infaillible. Ils sont apparus par le biais d'un processus complexe d'essais et d'erreurs. Pendant 4 milliards d'années, des mécanismes de mutation et d'autocorrection de plus en plus complexes ont conduit à l'évolution des arbres, des dinosaures, des jungles et finalement des humains. Nous avons maintenant invoqué une intelligence autre, non organique, qui pourrait bien échapper à notre contrôle et mettre en danger non seulement notre espèce, mais une multitude d'autres formes de vie. Les choix que nous ferons tous au cours des années à venir détermineront si le fait d'avoir donné le jour à cette intelligence fut une erreur fatale ou s'il marque le début d'un nouveau chapitre plein d'espoir de l'évolution de la vie.
Merci beaucoup, Philippe. Voilà, donc moi je pense que c'est un bon moment là pour sur ce sujet assez brûlant, assez animé, ouvrir un peu les questions. S'il y a des personnes dans la salle qui ont envie de s'adresser à Yuval, de s'adresser à Asma. Voilà, première question.
Hello. Hello, Yuval. Thanks for your work. The world we live in right now, and all that you're discussing right now, it's the result of white male, perhaps, history. Do you feel that in your analysis you have sufficiently incorporated all of the talent that we've been incorporating of diversity, female, of the last decades that are now coming into the workforce and maybe improving some of these things?
Too many white male, you said? No, not enough diversity? No,
No,
it's
should
good.
we be more optimistic today as a result of all of this new talent that has been incorporated the last 3 decades within the world? No?
We judge the processes by their results. The world is certainly far more diverse. The world of science, of technology, of thinking than it was, say, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It has immense benefits for the world. Also with regard to AI, again, one of the main messages that I think we try to convey is that we need more people to be engaged with it. And for that, we need more people from all over the world to understand what is happening and to understand that this will have a huge impact on the life of every single human everywhere on the planet, not just in California, not just in Europe. So the more that people understand and join the debate, the better.
And actually, sometimes women are whistleblowers because the technology for now that we are using, yeah, of course, it's the heritage of, the hippie flower power of the, Silicon Valley and Stanford, yeah, of course, men and sometimes and often, yeah, white. So we are just, paying the heritage of our, history.
You're thinking about Francis Hogan, maybe?
And Timothy Brut, who has been fired,
Yeah.
From Google.
From Google.
Yeah, of course, and the whole ethical, path in the Silicon Valley. Yeah, we have many women, yeah, from the ethical side of the story.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your speech. You say that making the AI software open source would provide an important safeguard.
I mean, I know many people say it. I have no opinion. I don't know.
When we met, you told me the open source debate was a bit like, Catholic versus. Maybe you can elaborate a bit like,
I really think that this might be an illusion because, I mean, an open source plan of a gun doesn't make the gun less dangerous. And so I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on the open source link.
So what I basically said is that I have no strong opinion one way or the other about whether it should be open source or controlled by a small number of experts. I compared it historically to debates like we have in many religions, whether the code of the religion should be open sourced or whether it should be under the control of a small cadre of experts. So in Christianity, for instance, the Catholic Church believes that, this is a very important, powerful, potentially dangerous code in the wrong hands. So only a very small number of experts, the priests and the theologians, they are the only ones who should have access to the code, to interpret it, to explain it. And on the other hand, you have the Protestant churches that believe in open source, that you should just give the code to every person in the world that wants to read it and to interpret it and to explain it any way they want. And you have for centuries this debate and without a clear winner. And you see it in almost every religion, also in secular ideologies. Also, like in socialism, the Bolsheviks, they believed in small number of experts controlling everything, but compared to other socialist and anarchist movements, they, no, open source. And as a historian, I don't think that there is kind of a clear verdict that open source is always better or centralized authority is always better. And we are just, again, at the very beginning of the AI revolution. I would be careful not to kind of get into this trench warfare situation when people develop very strong opinions that it must be open source, and anybody who thinks otherwise, they are completely evil or whatever, or vice versa. Well, it's too early to tell, really.
Thank you. Allez-y, monsieur.
Good evening, and
yeah, please.
Just wait. I have a question for him because I'm also in the public. Now I have a question. As a historian, have we ever in history stopped an innovation, like, you know, the AI thing, before the accident, before a catastrophe? Have we ever, you know, been enough, you know, conscious and wise to stop it before the, you know, when we are on the edge? I'm thinking about, for example, you know, the nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have had to be at war and have, you know, this huge, you know, catastrophe to stop it and to regulate it.
So we have examples mainly from warfare that, and it did not take a full-scale nuclear war. After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world managed to avoid nuclear war. Also with chemical weapons, after the horrors of the First World War, they were not completely taken out of usage, but generally the ban was kept, like in the Second World War. Even the Germans kept the ban on chemical warfare, with biological warfare also. But the problem is that AI is not like nukes or chemical weapons. It has a lot of usages. It's dual usage. It's not just a weapon. So I think it's a wrong model. We do have, though, a lot of examples in history. You cannot just completely stop the development of a technology, but any technology can develop in many different directions, and you can, the optimistic scenario is that you shift the development of the technology in a positive direction and not in a negative direction, and not that you completely stop it. And this, we have quite a few examples in history that this is successful, from medicine, from industry. But this time, like, our margins of error are much, much smaller. Then if we get it wrong, the results will be truly catastrophic.
So, thank you very much. Good evening. I have a very naive question. I have some difficulty to imagine that AI could become independent or totally autonomous from human beings. So my question is, do you imagine a total independency of AI, or does it necessarily mean ever a kind of human control? So my point is AI going to be totally independent one day?
In theory, in the distant future, this is really the question about the superintelligence. In the distant future, it is possible that it will learn how to mine metals in the earth and how to build power stations and feed itself. Not now, but a lot of people think it causes them to feel complacent, that AI depends on us, so we are in control. No. It just means that it has more reasons to manipulate us. And it's a way to think about the power of AI. AI today is not independent. If you take an AI, you take GPT-4 and just drop it in the middle of the savannah somewhere, it can't do anything. The right way to think about it is as something analogous to the power of a lawyer. Think about, say, the smartest lawyer in the world. If you take her and drop that lawyer in the middle of the savannah, she's powerless. Any chimpanzee or elephant is much stronger. But within the bureaucratic, legal, financial systems that run the world, she's more powerful than all the lions of the world put together. Because all the lions of the world put together cannot understand a single law, cannot make any investments, don't know how to use the legal and financial systems. Lawyers do. Now, the AIs are stepping into the shoes of the lawyers, of the accountants, of the editors. They don't need to build the system from scratch. They are taking over the systems we have built to control the world. And in many ways, they are already better than us. No lawyer can know all the laws of France or all the laws of the EU. It's too much for the human memory. AI can. No lawyer for the human memory. AI can. No lawyer, no accountant or investor can follow all the bonds and all the trades on the stock exchange. And AI can. They are still dependent on humans to some extent, but once they know how to manipulate the humans, it's like we still depend on the plants and animals. But it doesn't mean that we don't control them. It means that we control them even more because we require them for our survival.
Thank you. Maybe, I think there is a question here. Il y a une question juste là. Allez-y.
Is it me? Okay. Thank you very much, and I am very lucky to be able to ask you a question. I actually would need a practical advice. So I really like the idea that we need to spread awareness and we need to have more people being interested and understand how this AI thing works. So how do we talk to young generation about it? Because I am a teacher working in a school where professors just say, don't use ChatGPT. That's cheating. And that creates a sort of a barrier because they do use ChatGPT. They are much smarter than us, but they don't understand how to actually use it as a tool. And so if we think a bit further, right, you have the little kids, you have older kids, how do we construct, how do you construct also the discourse around it to encourage young people to learn and to encourage them to use it in a right way? So I'm pretty sure that behind your idea that we need more awareness, there is some practical how to spread this awareness and especially how to interest the younger generation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would be happy then to hear what you have to say about it from your experience. But first of all,
that's too easy, Yuval.
They are already very interested. They are already very interested, and they also know that this is their future, and they need to be concerned more than anybody else. And regarding the specific issue, for example, of using ChatGPT to write essays or whatever, what I tell my students is, you can cheat your way through my course, you can't cheat your way through life. You are here, you have an opportunity to learn. If what I'm teaching you think it's not interesting or not important, why are you here? You're wasting your time. If you want to learn something, so it's very rare in life that you get this opportunity that you can just spend time learning. You will not have this opportunity like this later in life. And in a way to work with them, what are your concerns? If you think that, like, I gave you an essay about the history of Louis XIV and they don't care about it, so they gave ChatGPT to write it, So, okay, I'm with you. You think it's not, what is relevant? What do you think you need in order to survive later in life? Because if you just rely on the AI, we don't need you for anything. What do you know that the AI doesn't? And I think that when I talk with young people, they are often much more concerned than older people, not less. And of course, we can't just throw it on them. We, first of all, need to have the understanding ourselves so that we can guide them. And one more thing, I'll say that AI is making the world change faster than ever before. And the older people are, usually it's more difficult to change. So people who are already established, let's say, in some profession, they're often terrified by the idea that I need to basically maybe learn my profession from scratch because everything is changing. And then they kind of try to block, just don't use it. And it's our responsibility to make the effort to understand ourselves what is happening in order to be able to guide the younger generation. And making them interested is the easiest thing. Because I think they are deeply interested and they are deeply fearful. And we need not to kind of block it or throw it on them, but to ourselves make the effort to understand so that we can give them proper guidance. And I think then they'll be super interested in writing the essay.
Good news.
You want to
Asma?
Add something. It was so brilliant. No, at the question, your question to say, yeah, give me a practical advice. Actually, there's no practical advice, I'm sorry. Because we are talking about a new society, a new civilization. We are talking about a very long time of history. So it's, you know, you have many dimensions. It's not just a problem, a tool. It's not that easy. I mean, it's more complex than that. So regarding, you know, the young people, we have, as adults, this super weird and old idea that they are dumb, stupid, not interested, they are not working, etc. It's a very old idea. It's just have to accept the fact that maybe with these tools, we have new hybrid uses of how to build knowledge. We are going to build it with screens, with AIs, but also with books combined. And we have to build this new way of build knowledge and a new vision of the world, how to even build social bonds, you know, new ways of, I don't know, falling in love, reading things, thinking the world, but with screens and books, with virtual and reality. Both of them, and not in an exclusive way of, you know, you just have to ban this ChatGPT thing or you just use only books. I mean, it's stupid because it's not the sense, the way of our history, as you said. And it's gonna be long. And it's okay if it's long. What's the problem? Tell me. Why are we so in a hurry? I mean,
the hurry because it's really
AI,
is moving very, very fast.
Yeah, you're super AI thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can sympathize with the kind of anxiety around it because it is moving.
Yeah, right.
I think that's the key point about it being inorganic. That we are used to these organic cycles, which are quite slow, and the AIs, you know, the development, if you look at ChatGPT, so it's developed so fast that existing institutions, they are just not built, they are not used to dealing with an advance which is so fast.
Yeah, right. I rephrase it. why should we be so impatient? Not in a hurry.
Thank you. So, peut-être une autre question. En tout cas, ça intéresse tout le monde, la question sur l'éducation. Il y a pas mal de mains qui se lèvent en haut. Voilà.
Thanks. Question, what we can do as individuals, and also should we consider donating to charities working on these issues?
Donating to charities, and what was the first?
Qu'est-ce qu'on peut what can we do as individuals?
Oh.
Restart everything from the beginning.
So very briefly, I mean, we have power as citizens who we vote for, on what issues we vote. The most important power is to join organizations, institutions, charitable or otherwise. 50 people working together as part of an organization are far, far more powerful than 500 isolated activists. So whatever kind of cause is close to your heart, join an organization on that, or if there is no organization, start one. As on the individual level, my best advice is to go on an information diet. That we are now flooded by far too much information, and most of it is junk information. And we talked a lot about the AIs that are now in control of much of the information system and that deliberately flood us with greed and hate and fear. And it's like junk food for the mind. It's addictive, and it makes people sick, and it makes the whole society sick. And definitely. And again, I wouldn't place the kind of responsibility on individuals. And ultimately, it's the corporations and governments that are responsible. But on the individual level, one thing we can do, the same way that a lot of people are becoming very mindful of what they eat and how much they eat, they have a food diet, we need to treat our mind the same way and go on an information diet, being very mindful of whether we eat junk information or healthy one, and also just simply of the quantities. That just as too much food just isn't good for you, too much information isn't good for you, because the mind needs time to digest, just like the stomach. So if you're constantly just consuming more, which is what the algorithms often want you to do, you have no time for digesting, reflecting, meditating, and you need that. So this is something that people can do individually. I mean, again, I'm not, just as food diets are kind of personal, individual, it's not like one size fits all. It's also with information diets, but invest in it as much as you invest in finding your food diet.
Thank you. Maybe super quickly on charities, and maybe we're gonna, do you know something interesting? Or?
I know that there are many, I don't know, in France, I know that there is the Center for Humane Technology, which is based
with Tristan Harris?
With Tristan Harris, which is based in Silicon Valley, and is doing amazing job. Yeah. And I don't know if they are a charity or not, but definitely, I think so, worth supporting.
With Azar Raskin, so Center for Human Technology.
Center for Humane Technology.
You can find their website. Peut-être une autre question. Ouais, il y a encore pas mal de mains. Ouais, on me dit qu'il y aura plus beaucoup de questions, je crois. Donc, allez-y.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I come back on another subject, immigration. And if I well understood and heard, you said that the problem is to take IDs, take our jobs. So it's what people think usually. But surprisingly, you didn't mention anything on violence and on security. And having read carefully your Sapiens book, especially if I well understood, security is one of the key points that make the humanity growing. So What do you think about that? And especially my question is, do you think AIs can solve or help managing security facing immigration?
AI, like in every field, AI has applications, and they can be beneficial and they can be very dangerous. It depends in whose hands the AI is being used and for what purposes. And of course, if it gets out of control, it can be even more dangerous. So we already see the militarization of AI in many fields. In contrary to what kind of Hollywood conditioned us with science fiction to expect, we still don't see the killer robots. The actual shooting and killing is still done a lot by human beings. But the first place we see a major kind of intervention of AI is actually in the decision-making process, like in choosing the targets. Like in the war between Israel and Hamas and Israel and Hezbollah, Israel used AI abilities to select targets. Like previously in wars, the decision which building to bomb was made entirely by human beings. Increasingly, AIs are part of the decision-making process. There is a huge debate, which I don't know the answer to whether they are now, like, to what extent the AI are actually choosing the targets or only recommending, and then you have humans verifying it. But they are certainly capable already of choosing targets completely by themselves, And fast forward a few years, once you have AIs on both sides of a war, and this goes back to the issue of slow and fast, the pressure to just do what the AI says will be almost irresistible. Because if both sides are using AIs to choose targets, and one side says yes, but when the AI says bomb this place, we first have to go through, okay, the AI recommended, now we bring the human analysts to go over all the data and make sure that it's right and that there are no civilians there and so forth, and the other side just bomb it, it's obvious who is going to win the war. So the pressure will be more and more intense to give AIs greater and greater control of military decisions, even before we have the killer robots. And there is many debates about the ethical aspects of this, the geopolitical aspects of this. What should be clear that AI is already causing a tremendous revolution in the military and in security. So like that, to understand now the news market, we need to understand how AIs make decisions. To understand war, increasingly, we need to understand military AIs.
Merci beaucoup. Et je ne sais pas si on a le temps pour une toute dernière super rapide question. Ouais, je crois que... Alors, super rapide. Voilà. Et après, on va remercier toutes les personnes qui ont permis cette discussion passionnante. Allez-y, monsieur.
Thank you so much for your lecture. I was very impressed, and I would like to express my gratitude. However, since hearing your lecture for today, it seems like the AA is the big monster of the next era. In my opinion, that's completely wrong, because it should just be used as a tool that we should use and just basically make our daily task easier. So the best way to use it is to basically make it illiterate. There's a lot of illiteracy in people how to use technology. If we make people aware how to use it right, and create a certain awareness, I don't think it's going to be the next, let's say, box of Pandora.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I'm not prophesizing that AI will inevitably destroy human civilization. What various scholars, and I'm one of them, we are doing, we are painting several dangerous scenarios in different fields of things that can go wrong, and we do it as a way to increase this kind of AI literacy or technological literacy. If more people are aware of the dangers, then both individually and as societies, it increases the chances that we will make the right choices about how to develop these technologies and how to use these technologies. And then we can avoid the worst case scenarios and enjoy the tremendous potential benefits of AI, which are definitely there. In fields from healthcare to education to many fields, AI can have tremendous advantage, positive contribution to humanity. And yeah, this is the idea, to get more people to understand and to join the debate, and hopefully we'll make good decisions.
Merci beaucoup. Je voulais dire un tout petit mot très rapide, remercier Zoé Moll et Clémentine Fourré qui m'ont aidé. I just wanted to thank you very much, Yuval, for being here tonight with us. Merci beaucoup aux éditions Albin Michel, au point que vous pourrez retrouver, dans lequel... It's for you. À Asma, qui nous a fait l'amitié d'être avec nous ce soir. C'était vraiment super. Donc on peut retrouver les ouvrages d'Asma et de Yuval à la sortie de cette salle, et on vous donne aussi rendez-vous. Encore un grand merci d'être venus si nombreux, c'est un super débat. Dans Le Point, on essaye de suivre toute cette révolution avec passion, et merci encore énormément pour cette discussion.
Thank you.